The rising sign in astrology tells us way more than how we look or how we appear or how we present in the world. It tells such a deep story, not only about us, but about the entire nature of our lives. And in this video, I'm going to go over what that story looks like for all 12 rising signs. But first, let's set the mood. The zodiac and all 12 signs, as well as all 360 degrees, tells us a story of all of the possible energies that exist around us. But there's an order to those degrees, to the signs, one that is more linear than you may expect. And similar to how the laws of physics that govern our world follow a system, well, so do the zodiac. And so our ascendant or our rising sign does mark where we begin, but as we know, there is so much more to life than just existing. There's a concept in astrology called the houses, and in whole signs astrology, which is the system I'll be using for this video, each zodiac sign that follows your rising sign tells us a unique story about how your life may unfold. And as I stated earlier, even the signs and even this house system works with a natural linear progression. Because after our rising sign or our first house or the house of self comes the second house, represented by the next sign in the zodiac. And this represents the core material concepts that shape who we are. Whether it's money, our resources, or our sense of self-worth, this is the natural next step in the story of us. And then we move on to the third house, where our identity and our material world are then shaped into interaction. Whether it's how our mind processes our environment or our thought or communication patterns, the third house, the sign, and any relevant planets involved will give color to how that immediate communicative or interactive mechanic is shaped in our lives. And as you move through all zodiac signs and all 12 houses in astrology, the implications become more complex, and we eventually begin to not just see the things that shape our identity, but the factors that exist outside of us and how those reflect in our lives. And all 12 rising signs are marked by a unique combination of signs that rule over all 12 houses, each with their own natural yet unique progression. And as I hinted at the beginning of the video, I have gone into all 12 rising signs story, and all of those timestamps can be found in the description. And I spent months writing this, and so I really hope it helps you not only to understand yourself better, but also your life better. And if you like detailed videos like this, detailed astrological tutorials, but also detailed forecast videos, which I do post regularly, please give this video a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. This just lets the algorithm know that you like this type of content, but it also lets me know that I'm doing a good job. Before we go into the personal reading, I just want to preface this by saying obviously your placements and the aspects will make a huge difference to the story of who you are, but I want you to use this story to really get inspired to look at your birth chart on a whole new level, and then you can take a look at your placements, add in the nuance, and really understand what your chart means on a whole new level. And so now let's get into it. And so now that we have that out of the way, go down to the description, click on your timestamp, and let's get into the heart of the matter in 3, 2, 1, go. With Aries on the Ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by a raw instinctual drive to collide with the present moment. This is not a preference for impatience or a simple desire to be first. It is your core mode of being and your primary survival mechanism. This isn't about just starting things, it's about a deep psychological and constant impulse to prove your existence by making an immediate impact on your environment. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet of Mars defines this perspective, filtering your entire world through a lens of potential friction, conquest, and direct agency. You perceive the world not as a static picture, but as a series of immediate challenges that must be met, overcome, or catalyzed. The primary way you learn about yourself is not through reflection, but through kinetic feedback, by throwing your body and will against resistance and seeing what moves. This creates a life path dedicated to courage, autonomy, and the thrill of the first step, where stagnation, waiting, or dependency is not just an annoyance, it's a deep fundamental threat that feels like a loss of vitality. And your identity is forged in the fires of direct experience. To be passive, hidden, or slow is a fundamental denial of your very being, and this simple essential truth about your need to initiate frames every other area of your life. That inherent combustible and high-velocity drive is a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. A warrior without a supply line is just a burnout waiting to happen. Pure initiative, you learn, is useless if it lacks the fuel to sustain the campaign. And so with the second house in Taurus, your approach to resources is not just about greed, it's about securing the unshakable fuel for your independence. Ruled by Venus, your values are processed through the lens of stability, tangible assets, and sensory grounding. Money, possessions, and skills are not just objects, they are the logistical bedrock of your freedom. They must provide a deeply felt essential sense of immovable security. This is where the Arian need to sprint is filtered by the Taurian need to sustain. You are driven to value assets that cannot be taken away, income that is consistent, and a physical constitution that is enduring. You understand on a core level that freedom is only real if you can afford to pay for it yourself. A lack of funds or a lack of resources feels like a physical cage that becomes restricting for your movement. This need for material self-reliance is the only thing that gives your erratic or fiery energy a lifespan, creating a calm, funded, and stable foundation from which your will can safely and dangerously operate. That deep, stable, and funded foundation you built is not a place to hoard. It is the necessary supply depot that allows you to deploy into the field. The immovable resources of your Taurian nature are safe, but they are static. They don't move. And so with the third house in Gemini, your immediate environment creates a need for rapid tactical navigation. Ruled by Mercury, your mind is not just a library, it's a radar system. Your core area need to act is transformed into a restless, inquisitive, and sharp-witted will to gather intelligence. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just chatter, they are a recon mission for you. They involve quick exchanges and strategic pivots. This is why a boring conversation, a lack of data, or being stuck in a monotonous routine is not just a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct personal and fundamental trap. It is a stagnant void that neutralizes the fuel of your second house and makes your Arian agency feel blind. Therefore, your communication is a constant, agile act of mapping the territory, placing your sharp intellect at the forefront of every interaction to ensure the best path forward is always instantly, tactically identified. You are constantly categorizing your immediate world into the useful, threat, or the irrelevant to facilitate speed. That fast, frantic, and scattered intelligence gathering is not just a skill, it is energetically depleting and creates a massive noisy storm of nervous tension at times. And so with the fourth house in Cancer, your home and innermost self are not just a home, they are a fortified emotional bunker of your entire life. And this is the payoff. This is the recovery. For all of the fighting, pushing, and sprinting your Aries ascendant does in the world, this is kind of your reward. Ruled by the moon, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one fundamental place on Earth where you are not fighting, proving, or initiating. You are feeling. And this is where you retreat to find softness, protection, and a private tribe that defends you. This foundational sense of emotional safety is not a preference, it's a fundamental requirement. Without a soft, private, and deeply protective inner world, the constant tactical noise of your third house degrades into a state of frantic defensive burnout, causing your Arian courage to collapse under the weight of perpetual war. This emotional sanctuary is the only thing that makes your external battle sustainable. You are deeply protective of your privacy because it is the only place where your armor comes off. From that private, protected, and deeply emotional bunker where you finally felt safe enough to lower your guard and recharge your battery, your energy now demands a glorious public release. But this is not the tactical data of the lower mind, nor is it the quiet safety of the home. With the 5th house in Leo, your joy is a deep, radiant, and unapologetic act of ego expression. Ruled by the sun, this is where your private emotions are transformed into a grand performative demonstration of your unique identity. The Aryan need to exist merges with that Leo need to be seen, validated, and adored. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of your personal will leaving a visible, undeniable mark on the world, the thrill of creative risk, the sheer heat of romance and play. Play, for you, is not a frivolous activity. It is the absorbing, serious process of proving you are the main character in your own life. It is the joy of the athlete taking the winning shot, the artist unveiling the masterpiece, the lover chasing the conquest. This is where your inner will becomes a will to shine and dominate, finding deep satisfaction in making your internal fire external. A life without recognition, without a creative outlet, or without a romance feels like a dimming of your light, and it feels like you are disappearing. The radiant, dramatic, and egocentric standard that you set for your creative expression is not a permanent vacation, though. While it burns bright, it creates a chaotic, high-energy output that eventually becomes messy, inefficient, or physically draining. A fire without a hearth eventually burns down the house. And with the 6th house in Virgo, your daily life, your work, your health, and your routines are where this explosion of energy is disciplined, refined, and made useful. This house is ruled by Mercury, but in its earthy analytical form. This is a crucial high-stakes link in your chart. Your daily routine is a maintenance schedule for the weapon that is you. Your work environment is a workshop of efficiency. Therefore, a disorganized day or a physical illness or a not good enough method that wastes time is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep psychological and mechanical failure. It is an intolerable systematic glitch that threatens your core area need to win, making you feel physically weak, ineffective, and deeply frustrated. Your drive here is a constant critical quest to optimize the vehicle of your body and your craft. You are not working hard just to be a good worker. You are working hard to remove every obstacle that slows you down, and this is the transformative, humble mission to perfect your technique so that your spirit never fails. That intense, optimized, and technically perfect machine that you built was an isolating, self-focused, and functional process. You have sharpened the blade and you have perfected the routine, but a weapon is useless without something or someone to encounter. Because with the 7th house in Libra, your one-on-one relationships are not a simple meeting of hearts. They are strategic, balancing, and often a challenging quest for equalization. Ruled by Venus, this is the arena where your core Aryan identity, which lives in a world of self-interest, speed, and singularity, comes face to face with the immovable reality of other people. You are not drawn to partners who are just like you. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who possess more grace, diplomacy, maybe aesthetic beauty, although you can be very beautiful with an Aries rising, don't get me wrong, but also social strategy. And this is where your identity as a solo warrior is dissolved, replaced by a quest for a tactical alliance. This mirror forces you to stop pushing and to finally negotiate what you want. Your endless drive, for the first time, must pause for the sake of harmony, teaching you the ultimate Aryan paradox, that you can only win the war if you learn how to draft a binding peace treaty. And if you refuse to balance your energy here, your relationships become battlegrounds for open conflict. That polite, strategic, and balanced alliance you formed was a contract. It was the necessary social agreement to keep the peace and to connect, but you are left standing in a Libran room of pleasantries which, while fair, could also be superficial, detached, and lacks the visceral intensity that you secretly crave. And so now you are plunged from that polite negotiation into the dark, psychological, and transformative trench of shared survival. And so with the 8th house in Scorpio, you must prove that partnership by merging your resources and your very soul. Ruled by Mars and Pluto, this is the arena where your independent, fast-moving Aryan nature, which usually fights alone, is forced to confront the terrifying power of vulnerability and trust. This is not a house of a polite dinner date. It is the house of a blood oath. And so shared finances, sexual intimacy, and deep psychological secrets, but also inheritances, are not just administrative tasks. They could be battlefields that demand total loyalty, but also ego death. Your core drive is to win, survive, and be first. And Scorpio's demand is to die to the self, to emerge, and to be reborn. This is where you are forced to become a strategist of the soul, learning the intense, terrifying work of letting someone else hold the power, if only for a moment, to achieve a deeper transformation. After the intense, heavy, and psychological process of merging and surviving the depths, you have proven your loyalty. You have survived the transformation, but you are exhausted, dark, and confined, left in the heavy pressure cooker of the scorpionic bond. For you and Aries rising, emotional heaviness is not the end. It is a trigger for a massive, explosive escape into the light. And so with the 9th house in Sagittarius, you are dramatically liberated from that emotional density and shot up like an arrow into the vast, open, and optimistic sky of pure belief. Ruled by Jupiter, this is your ultimate philosophical battlefield. This is where your Aryan spirit, having been tested by the darkness of the 8th, gets to fight for a cause. You are not interested in dry facts or polite theories. You are driven to find a worldview that is morally inspiring, adventurous, and huge. You build your philosophy on the concept of freedom, on the righteousness of the crusade, and on the thrill of the unknown. You seek wisdom through direct experience, maybe travel, or taking bold leaps of faith, creating a new expansive intellectual ground that is wide enough to hold your massive energy and free you from the emotional cage entirely. This is why you can be prone to dogmatism or intense debates, because your beliefs are not just thoughts, they are the moral ammunition for your actions. That expansive, adventurous, and philosophical crusade you embarked on was perfect, inspiring freedom. It was the ultimate expression of the spirit. But a crusade without a castle is just wandering, and a belief without structure is just hot air. You cannot live on potential alone. So with the 10th house in Capricorn, your public role is to harden that fiery, adventurous spirit into a cold, unshakable, and authoritative monument of achievement. Ruled by Saturn, this is the ultimate payoff and righteous test of your life's potential. This is where your Aryan identity, the warrior, the pioneer, or the starter, is called to become the general. Your legacy is not a fleeting spark. It is a rigid, towering structure of respect and command. You are not just a doer. You are an authority, a boss, or a captain of industry. You are the leader who takes the chaotic energy of the start and forces it into a finished result. Your career is not about being liked, it's about being respected, proving that the wildest fire can be channeled into the most deep, enduring steel. This placement suggests that despite your impulsive nature, you have a deep, burning ambition to be seen as competent, mature, and successful in the eyes of society. Failure here is not an option. It feels like a complete collapse of your dignity. That rigid, authoritative, and commanding legacy that you built, though, was a masterpiece of discipline because you became the boss, the structure, or the law, but it can also be isolating. It was all top-down and no lateral connection. And a king without a council has no vision, or a CEO without a network has no future. And so, with the 11th house in Aquarius, your ambitions for success and your connection to society are powerfully galvanized into a single intellectual point of revolution. Ruled by Saturn and Uranus, this is a direct reaction to the Capricornian hierarchy, and this is the arena where your core Aryan identity, the solo hero or the competitor, is forced to join a team. This is your most fascinating challenge, to stop giving orders and to start building a movement. Your network is not a social club, it is a war room of innovators, rebels, and forward thinkers. And this is where your drive to lead is socialized. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your power is multiplied when you fight for the collective, not just for yourself. And your ultimate place in the world is not just to rule, but to be the sharp, innovative spark that galvanizes the group to break the old rules that that you just mastered. You are drawn to groups that honor your individuality while fighting for a shared future. And the sweet spot is becoming the tip of the spear for a community cause. But then finally, your journey through the revolutionary collective and future-focused network leads to the most hidden, paradoxical, and necessary part of your entire being. You have given your energy to a group and the future, and with the 12th house in Pisces, your sharp, direct, and ever-active Arian ego must confront its secret undoing, a vast, formless, and spiritual ocean of surrender. Ruled by Jupiter and Neptune, this is your conscious release valve. This is the quiet, foggy, and deeply mystical part of you that secretly yearns to stop fighting, to stop winning, and to simply dissolve into the cosmos. And this is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of helplessness, of losing your edge, or being swallowed up by emotions that you cannot conquer with a sword. This is the self-sabotaging urge to escape reality when the pressure gets too high, leading to escapism or isolation. And yet, this is also your secret primal source of renewal. It is the dream state that heals the soldier. This is where you recharge, not through action, but through a silent spiritual surrender to the unknown, washing away the battles of the cycle before you are reborn into the first house to ignite that spark once more. You have a hidden, boundless compassion that you rarely show the world, and so with that Aries rising, you are now finally ready to show it. With Taurus on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by a non-negotiable instinctual drive to build, stabilize, or embody. This is not a hobby or a preference, it is your core mode of being. This isn't about being materialistic or stubborn in the stereotypical sense. Rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by making it tangible, secure, and real. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet of Venus defines this perspective, but not in the airy relational Venus of Libra way. This is Venus in its earthy possessive sign, filtering your entire world through a lens of what is valuable, what is beautiful, and above all, what is essentially concrete. You perceive the world as a garden to be cultivated, a space where steady, deliberate, and patient effort creates lasting physical results. The primary way you learn about yourself is by grounding your energy, planting your feet in the physical realm, and producing concrete, tangible outcomes. This creates a life path that is often methodical, where rushing, instability, or abstraction is not just an annoyance, it is a visceral existential threat that triggers a deep cellular panic. It feels unreal and unsafe. Your identity is forged in the patient, unwavering act of building and sustaining. To be rushed, unstable, or unproductive is a fundamental negation of your very being. This simple, non-negotiable truth about your need for tangible, secure reality is the lens that frames every other area of your life. And this inherent drive to build and stabilize immediately confronts the question of what you are stabilizing and how you will build. And so with Gemini in your second house, your approach to resources is not just about having, it's about knowing. Ruled by Mercury, your values and assets are processed through a lens of intellectual curiosity, but also versatility. Money, possessions, and even your innate talents or self-worth are not just static objects of security. They are data points, tools with multiple uses, but also a flexible inventory. You are driven to categorize, assess, and to understand the utility of what you possess. You value skills, information, and assets that are convertible and adaptable. This Gemini need for information directly serves the Taurian need to build. You understand on a core level that knowing the facts about your resources, their multiple uses, their market value, how they connect, allows you to build a much more clever and resilient foundation, and your material world is an information network giving you the options and flexibility your fixed nature secretly craves. And then the versatile intellectual data you gathered is just a skeleton because it is your third house in Cancer that floods the skeleton with a living, breathing, and emotional lifeblood. You do not just think your way through your immediate environment, you physically absorb its atmosphere through your nervous system. Ruled by the moon, your perception is not a mental process, it is a visceral tidal gut feeling. Your daily world, the tone of your neighbor's voice, the vibe of the local cafe, the moods of the emails you receive is an emotional current that you are forced to swim in. And this makes your Venus-like nature or your peace-seeking nature hyper-vigilant. A bad atmosphere or a harsh word or an emotionally charged environment is not an idea, it's a direct physical assault of your stability. It feels like your cold draft in your safe, warm home. Therefore, your communication is not just nurturing, it is an instinctive, protective, and shell-building process. You use your words to build an emotional moat, to test the waters, and to create a nest of safety in every casual interaction because your ability to physically function depends on feeling secure in your immediate emotional world. But that Cancerian moat you built exists for one reason, to guard the treasure. With the 4th house in Leo, your home and your innermost self are not just a sanctuary, they are a golden, radiant, and absolutely sovereign throne for your entire life. This is the payoff, and this is the why. For all the slow, patient, hard work of your Taurus ascendant and what you do in the world, all of the building or the stabilizing and enduring, this is the reward. Ruled by the sun, this is the one non-negotiable place on earth where your value is fixed, unquestioned, and celebrated. Your home is not just a building, it is a monument for you. It is a tangible physical expression of your own magnificent, stable, and creative heart. This is the one place where you are not just the builder, you are the warm, radiant, and unquestioned ruler. This foundational sense of inner sovereignty is the solar-powered battery for your famous Taurian stamina. The world can be chaotic, but this inner golden core of pride, warmth, and unshakable self-worth is what makes you immovable. It is the radiant beating heart that fuels your entire existence. But from that radiant, sovereign inner kingdom, where you are the proud, celebrated heart of your own world, your creative energy yearns for tangible expression. But this is not the spontaneous, flashy performance of the 4th house, because with the 5th house in Virgo, your joy is a deep, sacred, and almost sensual act of devotion to the craft itself. Ruled by the planet Mercury, this is where your abstract pride is alchemized into physical perfect reality. The Taurian need to build something real merges with the Virgo need to make it flawless. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of your hands on the material or the hum of deep focus or the intellectual puzzle of how to make something better. Play for you is the absorbing process of mastering a skill so completely that you become one with it. It is the joy of the potter at the wheel, or the coder refining a line, or the gardener tending to a plant. The quiet, focused act of perfecting is your form of love. This is where your creative will becomes a will to heal and complete the physical world, finding a deep satisfaction in making something useful, whole, and beautiful. And your joy is in the tangible, flawless result that proves your mastery and devotion. The sacred, meticulous standard that you set for your craft, though, is not a part-time hobby. It becomes the absolute non-negotiable template for your entire existence. Because with the 6th house in Libra, your daily work, your daily life, your health, maybe your routines, is where this idea is tested. Because this house is also ruled by Venus, which is the very same planet that rules your ascendant, which makes this a crucial link because your daily life really becomes integral to your identity. Your routine is your embodiment. Your work environment is a direct reflection of your soul. Therefore, a chaotic, ugly, or inefficient, or unjust daily life is not just a mere annoyance, it is a visceral, physical, and spiritual violation. It is a discordant note that shatters your core Taurian need for stability, making you feel personally out of tune, unbalanced, and deeply unsafe. Your drive here is a constant aesthetic quest to create equilibrium. You are driven to beautify your workspace, to mediate conflicts, and to build routines that are not just effective but elegant. This is not about mundane chores. It is the art of curating a physical reality that sustains and reflects your Venus-like essence rather than one that drains it dry. That harmonious, beautiful, balanced daily life that you so carefully curate is not just the end goal, it is the prerequisite for your deepest challenge to your nature. Because with the 7th house in Scorpio, your one-on-one relationships are not simple. They're not just a simple Venus-like exchange of pleasantries. They are deep, alchemizing, and all-consuming crucibles of transformation. This is the arena where your core Taurian self, ruled by Venus, seeking peace, comfort, and simple, tangible security, comes face to face with the raw, messy, and powerful forces of life, ruled by Mars and Pluto. You are not drawn to superficial partnerships. You are drawn, often against your own desire for simplicity, to connections that demand your all. And this is where your own steady, possessive, and what is mine mindset is irrevocably challenged by the scorpionic what is ours. These partnerships force you to confront power, trust, shared secrets, and the terrifying magnetic pull of true unfiltered intimacy. It is in this mirror that your true desire for a calm life is burned away, replaced instead by a quest for a real one. You learn here that true stability is not the absence of storms, it is the resilience of a bond that can go to the very depths of hell and back, emerging changed but unbreakable. And this is where you are completely undone and then rebuilt. After navigating the intense, transformative, and psychologically shattering forge of your 7th house of partnerships, you then emerge, but you're not the same because that scorpionic merging has fundamentally altered your DNA. With the 8th house in Sagittarius, you are now driven by an urgent, expansive quest to find meaning in that transformation. Having been to the very bottom of the well, you now need to see the entire sky. Ruled by the great explorer of Jupiter, this house becomes your philosophical escape route. Your Taurian nature, having been deeply destabilized and merged, needs a new, bigger container to feel secure in. That old, simple physical world container is no longer enough. It has been cracked wide open. You must now build a worldview, a philosophy, or a belief system that is vast enough to hold the raw, complex, and intense experiences of your shared life. This is where you intellectualize the mystery. You turn the trauma of intimacy, the complexities of shared resources, and the reality of life and death stakes into a grand adventure of understanding. Your quest for stability is no longer just physical, it becomes metaphysical as you build a philosophy of meaning that allows you to make sense of the deep, non-negotiable bonds that define your world. That expansive philosophical quest was an emergency measure or a way to find a horizon when you were drowning in the scorpionic depths. But for you, a quest is not a home. An idea is not a ground. And so with the 9th house in Capricorn, that Jupiterian search for meaning must now become a Saturnian construction of reality itself. This is not a gentle exploration of belief. It is the slow, arduous, and deathly serious process of building a new bedrock for your entire life. Your original simple physical security was shattered by the transformative chaos of partnership, and so you can no longer trust just what you can touch. Therefore, you must build a truth that you can trust more than your senses. This is your pragmatic, earthly nature turning to the metaphysical as a last resort. Ruled by Saturn, your worldview becomes an architecture of absolute unshakable conviction. You are testing every belief, every law, and every truth for its loaded bearing capacity. Can it hold your weight? Can it withstand the pressure of reality? Your philosophy is not a belief, it is a fortress, a set of concrete, reliable laws that will never let you down. This is how you reclaim your stability, by manufacturing a new tangible ground of unshakable truth to stand on. And then from that self-made bedrock of absolute Saturnian conviction, you now have a foundation. You are secure again. So what do you, a Taurus rising, do? You build, and with a 10th house in Aquarius, your public role is the ultimate expression of your life's paradox. You are the one who gives tangible, lasting, and reliable form to the most intangible or radical and forward-thinking ideas. This house is co-ruled by Saturn, which is the structure you just perfected, and Uranus, which is the electric disruptive future. And so your career is not about climbing a traditional ladder, it's about building an entirely new one for everyone else. Your Taurian Venus-like soul craves lasting value, but here you are driven to find that value in the future, in the collective. You are the one who hears a radical humanitarian dream, and while others are just talking, you are the one methodically drafting the blueprint. You are the one that takes a revolution and builds the institution that allows it to last 100 years. You are the one who makes the ideal into a monument, and your public legacy is to be the master builder of the new world, the one who proves that the future is not just a dream, but something you can see, touch, and rely on. And then that concrete, tangible, and radical structure you built for the public is not an end in itself. A building, no matter how revolutionary, is just an empty shell until it is filled. And so with the 11th house in Pisces, your work now finds the ultimate purpose, to serve as a vessel for the collective dream. Ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, this is where your hard-won, pragmatic legacy dissolves its rigid boundaries to merge with a universal, compassionate ideal. Your core Taurian self, which finds security in the tangible and the owned, is now asked to find its community along dreamers, artists, mystics, or even outcasts, which are your true soul family. This is where your Saturnian, Uranian institution becomes a Piscean sanctuary. Your friendships are not just alliances, they are deep spiritual bonds. Your hopes for the future are not just personal ambitions, they are part of a boundless collective hope for humanity. This is the final beautiful paradox. Your earthy Venus-like drive to build value finds its highest expression by creating a stable, reliable container for the most ethereal, intangible, and compassionate dreams. And then finally, your journey through the collective compassionate dream leads you to the most hidden, unconscious, and paradoxical part of your entire being. With the 12th house in Aries, you must confront the unseen primal Martian fire that is the secret engine of your entire life. Your conscious identity is all about patience, deliberation, and building slowly, but in your subconscious or in your blind spot lives a raw, impulsive initiator. Ruled by Mars, this is the hidden warrior. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of sudden impulse of losing control or of your stable world becoming instantly undone. This is the self-sabotaging urge that can suddenly kick over the very tower you spent years patiently building, and yet this is also your secret primal life force. It is the raw instinctual will to live that fuels your conscious will to build. It is the hidden courage that erupts in a crisis. And so before you can be reborn in your first house to build again, you must surrender to this unseen fire, trusting the raw primal spark that exists before the form. And this is the unseen, untamed beginning that powers your stable, enduring world until you return to yourself again. With Gemini on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to connect, communicate, and understand. This is not a hobby or a preference, it is your core mode of being. This isn't just about being chatty in the stereotypical sense. Rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life intellectually, to gather information, and to map your environment. And this is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet of Mercury defines this perspective, but not the earthy, practical Mercury of Virgo. This is the Mercury in its airy, inquisitive sign, filtering your entire world through a lens of curiosity, data, language, and the connections between the seemingly unconnected ideas. You perceive the world as a vast living information network to be explored and mapped. Your primary way to learn about yourself is by asking questions, making links, and remaining mentally agile. This creates a life path that is often varied, adaptable, and restless, where staying in one place or holding one opinion for too long or being disconnected is not just an annoyance, it is a deeply felt fundamental threat that triggers a core panic. It feels stagnant, maybe a little bit dumb to you, and restrictive. And your identity is forged in the act of learning and exchanging information. To be bored or uninformed or misunderstood is a fundamental denial of your very being. This simple essential truth is about your need for intellectual engagements, and this is the lens that frames every other area of your life. This inherent restless drive to connect and gather data is a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. A million facts provides no real security. Information alone is just air, ungrounded and abstract. And so with the second house in Cancer, your approach to resources is not just about knowing, it's about feeling and cherishing. Ruled by the moon, your values are processed through a deeply intuitive, emotional, or protective lens. And so money, possessions, and skills are not just a flexible inventory, they are the literal and metaphorical bricks of your shell. They must provide a deeply felt, essential sense of comfort and safety. And this is where the Gemini-like need to know is filtered by the Cancerian need to feel secure. You are driven to value information that nurtures, skills that protect, and assets that create a sense of home. You understand on a core level that data is only valuable if it makes you feel safe. This emotional attachment is the only thing that gives your scattered mercurial energy an anchor, creating a stable emotional foundation from which your mind can safely and curiously explore the world. That deep, protective, emotional nest that you built, though, is not a place to hide. It is the essential, secure green room that fuels your public engagement. And so the raw data your Gemini-like nature constantly gathers is just a script or a collection of dry facts. It is your third house in Leo that transforms this script into a full-blown, radiant performance. Ruled by the sun, your mind is not just a network, it is a grand illuminated stage. Your core Gemini need to connect is transformed into a creative, joyful, and radiant will to be heard. And so your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are generous, warm, and engaging stories. This is why an environment that silences you, or an audience that ignores you, or a person that does not react is not just a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct, personal, and fundamental threat. It is a cold, invalidating void that sucks the warmth from your second house nest. Therefore, your communication is a constant, joyful act of creating your own kingdom, placing your perspective at the warm, celebrated, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure the light never goes out. Then that radiant, performative, and constant engagement with the world, it's not just a joy, it is energetically expensive and creates a massive chaotic storm of mental clutter and social feedback. And so with the fourth house in Virgo, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary. They are the sacred analytical engine room of your entire life. This is the payoff and this is the why. For all of that fast-paced, adaptable data gathering your Gemini Ascendant does in the world, this is the reward. And so ruled by Mercury, the very same planet as your Ascendant, this is the most crucial high-stakes link in your chart. This is the one fundamental place on Earth where you are not performing, you are processing. And this is where you retreat to meticulously categorize, filter, analyze, and perfect the overwhelming stream of data from your Gemini existence. This foundational sense of precise, efficient order is not a preference, it is a fundamental psychological requirement. Without a clean, analyzed, and well-managed inner world, the constant mental activity of your Gemini Ascendant doesn't just lead to anxiety, it degrades into a state of debilitating, unbearable, and unproductive internal chaos. This ordered foundation is the only thing that makes your external agility possible. And then from that meticulously ordered analytical inner kingdom, where you've sorted all the data into its perfect place, your creative energy yearns for a beautiful externalized outlet. But this is not the raw expressive performance of the third house, because with the fifth house in Libra, your joy is a deep, sincere, and almost artistic act of devotion to the connection itself. Ruled by Venus, this is where your abstract categorized data is transformed into a refined, pleasurable exchange of ideas. The Gemini need to know merges with the Libra need to make it beautiful. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a conversation clicking perfectly into place, the beauty of a well-balanced argument, or the sheer charm of a witty, flirtatious exchange. Play for you is the absorbing process of mastering the art of rapport so completely that you and another become one intellectual unit. It's the joy of the debater finding the perfect counterpoint, the writer finding that elegant phrase, the artist achieving perfect symmetry. And this is where your creative will becomes a will to connect and harmonize, finding deep satisfaction in making your thoughts beautiful and finding a perfect harmonious reflection in the mirror of another person's mind. Then that sincere, meticulous, and harmonious standard that you set for your intellectual and social connections, it isn't just a part-time hobby. It becomes an absolute essential template for the truth that you must now apply to the messy, unglamorous, and often superficial reality of daily life. So when the 6th house in Scorpio, your daily life, your work, your health, and your routines, this is where this ideal will become rigorously tested because this house is ruled by Pluto and Mars. This is a crucial high-stakes link. Your daily life is a psychological battlefield. Your routine is your investigative process. Your work environment is a direct reflection of your hidden obsessions. Therefore, a superficial job or a good enough routine or an unexamined fact is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep psychological and spiritual violation. It is an intolerable psychic lie that shatters your core Gemini need to know, making you feel personally scattered, powerless, and deeply inauthentic. Your drive here is a constant obsessive quest to find the root cause. You are driven to obsessively excavate, get to the bottom of things, and purge all that is meaningless in your life. This is not about mundane chores. It is the transformative psychological mission to find real unseen power in the mundane. And then that intense investigative and psychologically purging work that you did, it could have been isolating, it's microscopic, and it could be a cynical process. You have excavated the roots of the mundane, and now you yearn for a grand unifying answer. And so with the 7th house in Sagittarius, your one-on-one relationships are not a simple meeting of minds. They are a fiery, expansive quest for truth. Ruled by Jupiter, this is the arena where your core Gemini identity, which lives in a world of multiple, flexible, and relative facts, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of belief. So you are not drawn to partners who just want to debate. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by a grand, passionate, and optimistic philosophy. This is where your identity as a neutral reporter, the one who sees all sides, is burned away, replaced by a quest for shared meaning. This mirror forces you to stop just collecting the data and to finally choose what you believe in. Your endless information for the first time must come together into a single, passionate, and shared wisdom that can serve as a map for a bigger life. Then that expansive philosophical and exhilarating quest for truth, this is a promise, and it was the grand shared what if. But now you are plunged from the open sky of ideas into the cold, deep, and silent earth of consequences. And so with the 8th house in Capricorn, you must build the tangible Saturnian proof of that shared belief. And so ruled by Saturn, this is where your light, adaptable, and ever-moving nature, which loathes being trapped, is forced to confront the terrifying, immovable weight of permanence. This is not a house of ideas. It is a house of facts. So shared finances, deep psychological vows, taxes, inheritances, and binding legal contracts are not abstract concepts to be debated. They are structures that are binding and last through time. Your core mercurial drive is to move, to find a new option, to stay agile. And Saturn's demand is to stay, commit, and endure. And this is where you are forced against every fiber of your being to become an architect of the depths, learning the slow, arduous, and deeply serious work of building a legacy that will outlive you. It is the hard, unglamorous, and necessary labor of making the dream real by grappling with the real, unnegotiable consequences of your shared life. And then after the slow, arduous, and deeply serious process of building a tangible Saturnian structure in the depths, you have proven your commitment. You are secure. But for you, a Gemini rising, security is not the point, it's the launch pad. So with the 9th house in Aquarius, you are dramatically liberated from that earthly density and shot into the cold, clear electric sky of pure abstract thought. Co-ruled by Saturn, which is the structure you mastered, and Uranus, which is the revolution you crave. This is your ultimate philosophical escape route. This is where your Gemini intellect, having been forced into a Capricornian box, gets to design an entirely new system. You are not interested in ancient dogma. You are driven to find a worldview that is logical, humanitarian, or electrifyingly new and cutting edge. You build your philosophy not on faith, but on systems theory, scientific principles, or radical future-oriented ideals. Take what resonates, and you build your worldview through sudden, shocking, revolutionary insights and a detached, objective perspective, manufacturing a new radical intellectual ground that is vast enough to hold your experience and free you from the personal, emotional world entirely. And then that radical, logical, and humanitarian system that you built, this was a perfect, crystalline, and impersonal architecture. It was the ultimate freedom of the pure detached thought. But with a perfect system being just a shell or an empty, unfeeling structure, this moves on naturally to the 10th house in Pisces, where your public role is to flood that rigid, logical structure with the boundless, chaotic, and compassionate ocean of your collective dream. And so ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, this is the ultimate paradox of your life's work. This is where your Gemini identity, which is the master of facts, maybe data, and clear communication, is called to become the public voice for the uncommunicatable. Your legacy is not a rigid Saturnian title. It is your remarkable ability to translate the spiritual or the artistic or the imaginative into a form that the world can understand. You are not just a communicator, you are a channel. You are the mystic who explains the vision, or the artist who makes the dream visible, or the filmmaker who captures the collective mood, or the healer that really taps into what society needs. And your career is not about climbing a ladder, but about dissolving it, proving that the deepest use of the intellect is to give form to the formless, and that your true public calling is to be the adaptable, compassionate voice for a universal ideal. And then that compassionate, fluid, and boundary-dissolving dream that you channeled for the world is beautiful, but it could also be vulnerable. It is passive, all-accepting, and has no self or spine. And so, with the 11th house in Aries, your hopes for the future and your connection to community will become intensely focused into a single fiery point of action. And so, ruled by Mars, this is a direct reaction to the Piscean passivity. And this is the arena where your core Gemini identity, or the eternal student, the neutral reporter, the master of all sides, is forced to pick one. This is your most difficult challenge, to stop collecting perspectives and to take one. And so your tribe is not a gentle Piscean community. It is an army of innovators, leaders, trailblazers, and pioneers. This is where your adaptable communicative drive is given a sharp, active purpose. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for debate, they are a call to arms. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to talk, but to be the courageous initiating voice that starts the revolution and fights for the dream, sacrificing your own neutrality for a cause you believe in. And then finally, your journey through the fiery, initiating a future-focused fight for your ideals leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and still part of your entire being. Because with the 12th house in Taurus, your restless, mercurial, and ever-moving Gemini-like mind must confront its secret blast. It's an unseen, unmovable, and silent foundation. Ruled by Venus, this is your subconscious undoing. This is the quiet, stubborn, and deeply sensual part of you that resists all the change that you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the feeling of stagnation or being trapped, or that your quick mind will become dulled or missing out because some part of you simply refuses to move. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, unshakable refusal to be rushed, a secret attachment to this simple bodily comfort that brings your constant electric motion to a grinding halt. And yet, this is also your secret primal life force. It is the unseen, stable earth that allows your mind to fly. This is where you recharge, not through thought, but through silent, sensual connection to what is real before you are reborn in the first house to connect and communicate once more. With Cancer on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to protect, nurture, and feel. This is not a hobby or a preference. It's not fake, or it's not always dramatic even, but it is your core mode of being. This isn't just about being overly emotional in the stereotypical sense. Rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by creating a sense of emotional safety and belonging. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet, the moon, defines this perspective, filtering your entire world through a lens of shifting emotions, deep intuition, and powerful memory. You perceive the world as a place that can be either safe or threatening, and your primary drive is to establish a secure emotional base. This is a fundamental psychological requirement. A place, person, or situation that feels unsafe is not just an annoyance, it is a deep fundamental threat that triggers a primal, wordless panic. The way you learn about yourself and your environment is by attuning to the emotional currents, sensing the unspoken, and feeling your way forward. Your identity is forged in the act of creating security and emotional bonds. To be unsafe, unnurtured, or disconnected from a home base is a fundamental denial of your very being. This simple, essential truth is about your need for a safe harbor, and this frames every other area of your life. That inherent, protective, and deeply intuitive identity is a powerful compass, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. That feeling is not a fact. An internal, moody sense of safety is just an abstract state. It's vulnerable, unseen, and difficult for the outside world to trust or even acknowledge. With the second house in Leo, your approach to resources is not just about feeling safe, it's about proving it with joyful, visible, and undeniable radiance. Ruled by the sun, your values are processed through the lens of creative, heartfelt, and generous pride. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a quiet nest egg. They are the tangible, shining, external-facing throne of your internal emotional kingdom. You are driven to value assets that are beautiful, joyful, and above all, a source of personal, undeniable pride. This is not just about showing off, it is about externalizing your inner emotional state into something the world cannot ignore or dismiss. It is the proof of your heart's value made real. This is the core tension, because Cancerian energy is protective and its instinct must learn to use the bold, expressive Leo-like energy. You must build a kingdom that is not only safe but visibly glorious. This radiant, heartfelt generosity is the only thing that gives your unseen intuitive world a proud and stable place in the material realm. That proud, radiant, and heartfelt kingdom that you built is a magnificent creative display, but it is also static. Pride alone is just a performance. It doesn't do anything practical. It doesn't really help. And so with the third house in Virgo, your core Cancerian need to nurture is finally given its practical everyday instructions. Ruled by Mercury, your mind is not a grand, radiant stage. It is a meticulous analytical workshop. Your core need to connect and nurture is transformed into a practical, refined, and helpful will to be of service. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are constant, restless processes of analysis, fixing, and sorting. This is why a messy environment or a vague plan or a conversation that doesn't help is not just a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct personal and fundamental threat. It is a chaotic emotional void that makes your second house pride feel useless and your first house nurturing feel ineffective. Therefore, your communication is a constant practical act of creating order, placing your perspective at the busy, necessary, and helpful center of your environment to ensure your nurture has a tangible, everyday functional purpose. That constant analytical and restless engagement with the world is not just a helpful impulse. It is energetically expensive and creates a massive chaotic storm of mental clutter, social feedback, and maybe even anxiety. And so with the fourth house in Libra, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary. They are the sacred, visual, and relational anchor of your entire life. This is the payoff, and this is the why. For all the anxious, detail-oriented service your Virgo energy pours into the world, this is the reward. Ruled by Venus, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one fundamental place on Earth where you are not helping or fixing, you are simply being in a state of perfect balance. This is where you retreat to meticulously restore balance, peace, harmony, and beauty. This foundational sense of precise visual harmony is not just a preference, it is a fundamental psychological requirement. And so an ugly object or a loud noise or an unfair argument in your home is not a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct, personal, and overwhelming threat. It is a cold, invalidating void that shatters the Virgo-like third house's hard work, causing your sensitive Cancerian nature to crack from the inside. This harmonious foundation is the only thing that makes your external helpfulness possible. And then from the meticulously balanced, harmonious, and sacred inner world where you've restored perfect, polite peace, your creative energy yearns for a raw, externalized outlet. But this is not the polite, visual, surface-level pleasure of the fourth house. That was for balance. This is for truth. And so with the fifth house in Scorpio, your joy is a deep, sacred, and almost dangerous act of devotion to the truth itself. Ruled by Pluto and Mars, this is where your abstract, balanced ideal is transformed into a raw, consuming, and transformative passion. The Cancerian need to nurture merges with the Scorpionic need to dig deep. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative project becoming an obsession, the psychological thrill of an all-consuming romance, or the sheer power of an authentic, unfiltered emotional exchange. Play, for you, is the absorbing process of mastering the art of emotional truth so completely that you and another or you and your creation becomes one psychological unit. It is the joy of the artist finding the hidden meaning or the lover sharing a dark secret. This is where your creative will becomes a will to merge and transform, finding deep satisfaction in making your feelings real and finding a perfect, powerful reflection in the mirror of another's soul. Superficial fun is an insult. And then that intense psychologically purging and all-consuming creative process, it was isolating, microscopic, and often heavy. You have excavated the roots of passion, and now you yearn for a grand unifying answer that makes the darkness worthwhile. With a sixth house in Sagittarius, your daily life, your work, your health, your routines is not a simple list of chores. It is a fiery, expansive quest for meaning in the mundane. Ruled by Jupiter, this is the arena where your core Cancerian identity, which lives in a world of contained emotional safety, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of belief. You are not built for routines that just work. You are driven to find a daily life that means something. A job that is just a paycheck is not just an annoyance. It is a soul-crushing fundamental threat that makes you feel trapped and even dead inside at times. This is where your identity as a private nurturer is burned away, replaced by a quest for a daily purpose. This mirror forces you to stop just feeling safe and to finally choose what you believe in. Your mundane tasks for the first time must come together into a single passionate and optimistic wisdom that can serve as a map for a bigger life. That expansive, philosophical, and exhilarating quest for truth was a promise. It was the grand, optimistic what if. But you are left floating in a sea of pure belief, which, while beautiful, is also ungrounded, unproven, and formless. For your Cancerian nature, a belief that is not real is not safe. And so, leaving the expansive philosophies of the 6th house behind, you now enter the 7th house in Capricorn, which governs your one-on-one relationships, contracts, and open adversaries. And while your core nature may be to prioritize emotional connection and fluidity, this placement demands that your partners be built on a foundation of concrete reliability and structure. You may find that interactions with others feel unsubstantial unless there are defined roles or clear boundaries and a sense of enduring duty. This is not about a fleeting feeling. It is about the hard work of maintaining a union. Whether in business or your personal life, you are learning that trust is earned through consistency and time, not just intention. You may seek or attract partners who offer a grounding, serious presence, proving that true security in a relationship comes from the tangible reality of someone showing up exactly when they said they would, honoring the mutual agreement between you. After the slow, arduous, and deeply serious process of building a tangible Saturnian structure in your relationships, you have proven your commitment. You are secure, but you are also trapped inside the very walls you built for safety. For you, a Cancer rising, security is the shell, but a shell can also be a prison. And so with the 8th house in Aquarius, you are dramatically liberated from that earthy traditional density and shot into the cold, clear, and electric sky of pure abstract thought. Co-ruled by Saturn and Uranus, this is your ultimate psychological escape route. This is where your Cancerian instinct, which bonds through deep personal and emotional fusion, is forced to confront the terrifying, liberating power of detachment. Shared finances, deep psychological vows, and intimacy are not just about emotional merging. They are the systems to be analyzed, innovated, and perhaps radically restructured. You build your deepest bonds not on messy feelings, but on shared ideals, sudden insights, and a detached, objective perspective, creating a new radical intellectual ground that is vast enough to hold your experience and free you from the personal, emotional world entirely. This is where you break the rules of the 7th house to find a deeper truth. That radical, logical, and often detached system that you built in the depths of the 8th house was a perfect, crystalline, and impersonal architecture. It was the ultimate freedom of pure objective thought. But a perfect system is just a shell, an empty, unfeeling structure. It is logical but has no faith. And so with the 9th house in Pisces, your worldview is flooded by the boundless, chaotic, and compassionate ocean of the collective dream. Ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, this is the ultimate paradox of your life's journey. This is where your Cancerian identity, the master of the personal, protected, emotional world, is called to become the public voice for the uncommunicatable. Your philosophy is not a rigid Aquarian system. It is your remarkable ability to feel the spiritual, the artistic, and the imaginative. You are not just a nurturer. You are a channel. You are the mystic who feels the vision, the artist who makes the dream visible. Your worldview is not about climbing a ladder of facts, but about dissolving it, proving that the deepest use of feeling is to give form to the formless, and that your true expansive calling is to be the adaptable, compassionate voice for a universal ideal. This is the final answer to the 6th house quest, or the ultimate belief in oneness. That compassionate, fluid, and boundary-dissolving dream that you channeled is beautiful, but it could also be vulnerable. It is passive, all-accepting, and has no self or spine. It is the Piscean mist with no form or fight. And so with the 10th house in Aries, your public role is powerfully forged from this mist into a single fiery point of action. Ruled by Mars, this is a direct instinctual reaction to the Piscean passivity. This is the arena where your core Cancerian identity, the master of the shell, the protective, the internal nurturer, is forced to put on armor and stand on the public wall. This is your most difficult challenge, to stop hiding and protecting what is private and to start leading and initiating what is public. Your legacy is not a gentle Piscean community. It is the legacy of the pioneer, the trailblazer, the one who fought for those who couldn't. This is where your protective, nurturing drive is given a sharp, active purpose, not just for yourself, but for a public cause. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your feelings are not just for a private nest. They are the fuel for a public crusade. Your ultimate public calling is not just to nurture, but to become the courageous initiating champion, the warrior parent, sacrificing your own comfort to fight for a dream. That fiery, initiating, and courageous public battle that you fought was an exhausting, isolating, and deeply vulnerable act of pure will. It was all fire and no earth. It was a revolution, not a society. It was unsafe. And so with the 11th house in Taurus, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are powerfully grounded into a single tangible point of security. Ruled by Venus, this is a direct reaction to the Aryan instability. This is the arena where your core Cancerian identity, the eternal nurturer, the seeker of comfort, is forced to build a real tangible foundation from that fiery dream. This is your most difficult challenge, to stop initiating and to start building. Your tribe is not a fiery Aryan army. It is a garden of loyal, stable, and productive allies. This is where your emotional protective drive is made tangible. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for fighting, they are for building something real, valuable, and lasting. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to lead, but to be the dependable, steady, and anchoring presence that turns a revolution into a comfortable, sustainable, and secure new home. This is the true safety that you've always craved. And then finally, your journey through the slow, steady, and tangible work of building a secure future leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and restless part of your entire being. You have built the perfect, silent Taurian garden. You are safe, but you are also bored. And so with the 12th house in Gemini, your intuitive feeling and your Cancerian mind must confront its secret undoing, an unseen, persistent, and constant intellectual chatter. And so ruled by Mercury, this is your subconscious undoing. This is the quiet, restless, and deeply analytical part of you that resists all the emotional certainty that you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, of fear of your feelings being irrational, of being trapped by a fact that you missed, of your intuitive compass being scrambled by a million what-ifs. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, constant restlessness, a secret, anxious stream of data that brings your calm emotional certainty to a grinding halt. And yet, this is also your secret primal life force. It is the unseen, processing mind that allows your heart to feel. This is where you recharge, not through feeling, but through a constant intellectual sorting before you are reborn in the first house to feel and nurture once more. With Leo on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to create, express, and shine. This is not a hobby or a preference, it is your core mode of being. This isn't about performing on a stage with an audience in a stereotypical sense. Rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life from the heart and to radiate your inner light outward. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet, the sun, defines this perspective, filtering your entire world through the lens of creativity, joy, and self-expression, depending on the nature of your sun sign. And so you do not just exist, you radiate. You perceive the world as a personal stage upon which you can perform the grand, colorful, and warm story of who you are. The primary way you learn about yourself is by expressing your authentic self and seeing that self reflected, affirmed, and celebrated by the world or individuals around you. And this creates a life path that is often dramatic or generous, where hiding your light, or far worse, being ignored, is not just an annoyance, it is a deep fundamental crisis, a fundamental denial of your very being that feels like death. Your identity is forged in the act of joyful creation and self-revelation, and this simple essential truth about your need to radiate frames every other area of your life. That inherent, joyful, and constant drive to radiate is a superpower, but it immediately confronts the deep internal problem. Light can be blinding, but not secure. Radiance alone is just energy, ungrounded, chaotic, and vulnerable. And so with the second house in Virgo, your approach to resources is not just about shining, it's about perfecting and systemizing. Ruled by Mercury, your values are processed through a meticulous, analytical, and practical lens. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a glittering wardrobe, they are the literal and metaphorical gears of your performance. They must provide a deeply felt essential sense of order and utility. This is where the Leo-like need to be is filtered by the Virgoan need to fix. You are driven to value skills that are useful, systems that are efficient, and assets that create a sense of practical order. A flawed performance is not just an annoyance, it is a fundamental threat to your first house of radiance. You understand on a core level that radiance is only valuable if it is flawless. This meticulous attention to detail is the only thing that gives your scattered solar energy a practical anchor, creating a stable, well-managed foundation from which your heart can safely and generously shine. That deep, meticulous, and analytical engine you built is not a place to hide. It is the essential secure workshop that fuels your public engagement. The raw data of your Virgo nature constantly perfects, and this is just a script or a collection of dry facts. It is correct but not beautiful or charming. It is efficient but not graceful. It is your third house in Libra that transforms this perfect but dry script into a full-blown graceful performance. Ruled by Venus, your mind is not just a workshop, it is an elegant, balanced art gallery. Your core Leo-like need to be seen is transformed into a creative, charming, and relational will to be liked and appreciated, or at the very least balanced. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are generous, warm, and engaging gestures of building. This is why an environment that is ugly, or an audience that is rude, or a person who is unfair is not just a simple annoyance. It feels like a personal and fundamental threat. It is a cold, invalidating void that shatters the beauty of your second house's perfect work and makes your first house's radiance feel crass. Therefore, your communication is a constant harmonious act of creating your own court, placing your perspective at the charming, diplomatic, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure that harmony is never broken. But that graceful, harmonious, and constant social engagement with the world is not just a joy, it is energetically expensive and, more importantly, can be superficial. It's a performance based on being liked, but with the fourth house in Scorpio, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary, they are a secret, deep power plant of your entire life. This is the payoff, and this is the why. For all of the bright, charming, social-facing performance that your Leo Ascendant does in the world, this is the reward. Ruled by Pluto and Mars, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one fundamental place on Earth where you are not performing. You are purging, controlling, and regenerating. This is where you retreat to meticulously control, protect, and bond with what is truly yours. This is the foundational sense of absolute unwavering privacy, and this is not just a preference, it is a fundamental psychological requirement. An intrusion is not just a minor hassle, it is a deep fundamental violation that shatters your third house grace and makes your first house radiance feel fake and weak. So without a secure, intensely private, and emotionally authentic inner world, the constant demand to shine degrades into a debilitating, unbearable, and inauthentic internal crisis. This private, powerful foundation is the only thing that makes your external radiance possible. And then from that intensely private, controlled, and emotionally deep inner kingdom where you've protected your core self, your creative energy must break free. That scorpionic bunker was for safety and power, but it was also isolating, heavy, and dark. And so with the 5th house in Sagittarius, your joy is a deep, sacred, and almost philosophical act of devotion to freedom. Ruled by Jupiter, this is where your deep scorpionic roots are transformed into a fiery, expansive, and optimistic broadcast. The Leo-like need to shine merges with a Sagittarian need to make that light actually mean something or to turn it into a philosophy. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative idea clicking perfectly into a grand philosophy, the beauty of a well-told story, or the sheer thrill of a spontaneous adventure. Play, for you, is the absorbing process of mastering the art of belief so completely that you and your audience become one inspired unit. It's the joy of the storyteller finding the perfect moral, or the artist finding a universal theme, or the comedian whose joke reveals a deep truth. Your creative expression is your personal fiery truth. This is where your creative will becomes a will to expand and inspire, finding deep soul-level satisfaction in making your radiance meaningful and sharing your joy as a form of truth. That grand philosophical and optimistic standard you set for your creative expression is not a part-time hobby. It becomes the absolute essential template for truth that you must now apply to the messy, unglamorous reality of daily life. That Sagittarian quest was a promise, not a result. And with the 6th house in Capricorn, your daily life, work, your health, and your routines is where this ideal is rigorously tested and structurally built. This house is ruled by Saturn. This is a crucial high-stakes link. Your daily life requires a strong foundation to stand on. Your routine is your legacy. Your work environment is a direct reflection of your mastery. Therefore, a superficial job or a not good enough routine or a not sound system is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep, unstable, and potentially spiritual violation. When systems are built into your life and they are not designed to last, you can feel ungrounded but also unproductive. Your drive here is a constant, ambitious quest to build the structure. This is not about mundane chores. It is the slow, arduous, transformative mission to find real, tangible mastery in the mundane. This is the work of proving that you are, in fact, royalty. But in order to sit on the throne of that royalty, you must build a structure through your everyday life that allows you to sit on that throne and have it last, or withstand the test of time. That intense, disciplined, and mastering work you did was an isolating, microscopic, and often rigid process. You have mastered the mundane and built your throne through sheer Saturnian effort. You have proven your worthiness, and now you yearn for a grand, unifying equal to share it with. Because with the 7th house in Aquarius, your one-on-one relationships are not a simple meeting of hearts. They are a cool, intellectual quest for an ideal. Ruled by Saturn and Uranus, this is the arena where your core Leo identity, which lives in a world of personal, heartfelt, radiant loyalty and craves adoration, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of detachment. You are not just drawn to partners who want to adore you, though your first house thinks this is what is happening. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by a grand, logical, and humanitarian philosophy. This is the central conflict, because your Leo heart craves a royal subject, but your 7th house demands an equal partner who is above all else an individual. And this is where your identity as the one is burned away, replaced by a quest for a shared equal vision. This mirror forces you to stop just radiating at people and to finally choose an ideal with them. Your endless warmth for the first time must come together into a singular intellectual and shared system that can serve as a map for a bigger life or a partnership built not on codependence but on mutual revolutionary respect. Leaving the detached intellectual agreements of the 7th house behind, you enter the deep waters of the 8th house in Pisces. While the previous energy was about networking and logic, this idea of life demands total emotional immersion. With a Leo rising, you naturally want to shine individually, but here you have to face the messy reality of shared resources and intimacy. This is not about casual contracts. It is about the complex, often hidden entanglements of merging your assets and psyche with another into a boundless Piscean form. You could find that financial boundaries could become blurred, or your loans, debts, or inheritances are not clear-cut numbers, but confusing or boundless emotional tides. You could attract intimacy or intimate experiences with people who have elusive natures, whether with their finances or how they merge into the boundless. And this could force you to navigate the fog of crisis. Your solar nature wants to lead, but in the 8th house, you must surrender control to the flow of mutual dependency. You must surrender to a force that is unseen, but also could be very beautiful. Remember, Pisces is about creativity. And so for some, it is when you let go of that need to have your creativity have a boundful form that you can dissolve into the boundless and create something intense but beautiful. It is the practical but sometimes draining work of dissolving strict ownership boundaries to facilitate a spiritual or material union with another or with an outside force. And this process could challenge your ego, requiring you find a deep strength and vulnerability and clarity within the confusing. Leaving the boundless spiritual and ego-dissolving process of surrendering to the deep Piscean waters, you have proven your faith. You have become one with the void. But for you, a Leo, oneness is not the end goal, it is the launch pad. With the 9th house in Aries, you are dramatically liberated from that watery density and shot into the raw, blazing, and combustible dawn of pure personal conquest. Ruled by Mars, this is your ultimate philosophical rebirth. This is where your Leo-like identity has been forced into the Piscean ocean and reinvents itself and its beliefs through battle. You are not interested in ancient dogma or shared spiritual truths or even the collective we that doesn't really come from yourself. You are driven to find a worldview that is yours and yours alone, forged in the heat of your direct experience. You build your philosophy not on faith, but on action, on instinct, and on the sharp, piercing clarity of will. This is the philosophy of the pioneer. Your worldview is built through sudden initiating actions and a brave singular perspective, creating a new radical personal ground that is vast enough to hold your experience and free you from the collective entirely. It is the brave, defiant declaration of I exist and therefore I will do, and you will now have the beliefs to do so. That radical pioneering and self-made system that you built was a perfect fiery and personal declaration of independence. It was the ultimate freedom of pure instinctual thought, but it was also just an impulse. It was hot air, a war cry with no kingdom, and a spark with no fuel. And so with the 10th house in Taurus, your public role is to ground that fiery conceptual structure in the tangible, sensual, and patient earth of the real world. Ruled by Venus, this is the ultimate paradox of your life's work. This is where your Leo-like identity, which is the master of the grand gesture, the fiery performance, or the fast idea, is called to become the public voice for the tangible and the slow. Your legacy is not a fiery Aryan battle. It is your remarkable ability to translate the creative, artistic, or imaginative into a form that the world can touch, see, and value. You are not just a warrior, you are a builder. You are the person who makes that vision valuable, or the leader who makes a dream sustainable. Your career is not about a fast climb, but about planting a garden and tending to it, proving that the deepest use of creativity is to give form to the formless and to create something of real and enduring worth. A legacy fought for is fleeting, but a legacy cultivated is immortal. And then that tangible, beautiful, and valuable legacy that you built, it's beautiful, but it's also slow. It's fixed, silent, stubborn, and singular. It is a monument or a walled garden. It exists, but it doesn't really speak. And so with the 11th house in Gemini, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are dramatically shifted from that stillness into a buzzing, restless web of connection. Ruled by Mercury, this is a direct reaction to the Taurian silence. This is the arena where your core Leo-like identity, the eternal star, the fixed heart, and the master of one's story is forced to spend many. This could be a difficult challenge to stop building one thing and start circulating many. Your tribe is not a gentle Taurian garden or a band of adoring fans. It is a fast-moving, curious marketplace of messengers, traders, and communicators. This is where your radiant creative drive is dispersed. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not for being or building, they are for exchange. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to shine, but to be the curious, adaptable, and mediating voice that starts the conversation and makes your legacy relevant to the world around you. You realize that the dream is not yours to keep, but a seed to scatter to the winds of the mind. And then finally, your journey through the restless, curious, and future-focused exchange of your ideals leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and soft part of your entire being. That Gemini-like network was fast, intellectual, and social, but it could also feel impersonal, all in the head, and deeply ungrounding. And so with the 12th house in Cancer, your radiant, solar, and ever-performing Leo-like mind must confront its kryptonite, an unseen, persistent, and silent emotional need. Ruled by the moon, this is your subconscious undoing. This is the quiet, sensitive, and deeply vulnerable part of you that resists all the performance that you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of vulnerability or of being seen as needy, of your bright light being extinguished by a tidal wave of emotion, or of missing out because some part of you simply refuses to perform. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, deep-seated refusal to be rushed, a secret attachment to the simple emotional comfort that brings your constant radiant motion to a grinding halt. But yet, this is also your secret primal life force. It is the unseen ancestral womb that allows your heart to shine. This is where you recharge, not through performance or ideas, but through silent emotional connection to what is real, safe, and yours before you are reborn in the first house to create and radiate once more. With Virgo on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to analyze, improve, and perfect. This is not a hobby or a preference, it is your core mode of being. This isn't about being critical in the stereotypical sense, rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by making things better, more efficient, and more functional. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet Mercury defines this perspective, but this is not the airy, curious Mercury of Gemini. This Mercury is earthy and it's practical, and it filters your entire world through a lens of tangible details, functional systems, and practical processes. You perceive the world as an intricate, beautiful, but fundamentally flawed mechanism that can be understood, categorized, and perfected. The primary way you learn about yourself is by honing your skills, applying them in useful ways, and seeing the tangible results of your improvements. This creates a life path dedicated to a craft, a service, or a system where inefficiency, chaos, or good enough is not just an annoyance. It is a deep, fundamental threat that could feel like a personal failure. Your identity is forged in the act of thoughtful application and refinement, and to be useless, wrong, or unhelpful, or even inefficient is a fundamental denial of your very being. This simple, fundamental truth about your need to improve things frames every other area of your life. That inherent, restless, and analytical drive is a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. A perfect system that is ugly, unfair, or unbalanced is still in its own way fundamentally broken. Perfection of function, you learn, is useless if it creates friction, conflict, or simple bad taste. And so with the second house in Libra, your approach to resources is not just about function, it's about form, fairness, and harmony. Ruled by Venus, your values are processed through the lens of aesthetic, relational, and social grace. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a toolbox of useful items, they are an art gallery of curated choices. They must provide a deeply felt, essential sense of peace, balance, and beauty. This is where the Virgoan need to fix is filtered by the Libra need to harmonize. You are driven to value skills that create rapport, assets that are beautiful, and a budget that is fair and equitable. You understand on a core level that a perfect system is only valuable if it creates peace, not just efficiency. This need for aesthetic and social balance is the only thing that gives your scattered analytical energy a purpose, creating a stable, beautiful, and socially graceful foundation from which your mind can safely and pleasantly serve the world. That deep, harmonious, and aesthetic foundation you built is not a place to hide. It is the essential, secure courtroom that fuels your public engagement. The balanced data your Libra-like nature constantly gathers is just a social script or a collection of polite facts. It's polite, but it's not always true. It is your third house in Scorpio that transforms this pleasant script into a full-blown investigative probe. Ruled by Pluto and Mars, your mind is not just an art gallery, it is a psychological operating room. Your core Virgo-like need to know and fix is transformed into a piercing, obsessive, and powerful will to know the root cause. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are excavations, surgeries, and interrogations. This is why a superficial conversation or an audience that is lying or a person who evades the point is not a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct, personal, and fundamental threat. It is a cold, invalidating void that shatters the polite fiction of your second house and makes your Virgo-like analysis feel useless. Therefore, your communication is a constant piercing act of creating your own truth, placing your perspective at the deep, investigative, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure the real problem is always unflinchingly found. And then that intense, investigative, and constant engagement with the world's hidden facts, it's not just a skill, it is energetically exhausting and creates a massive chaotic storm of psychological clutter, social paranoia, but also cynical feedback. And so with the fourth house in Sagittarius, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary. They are the sacred philosophical launchpad of your entire life. This is the payoff and this is the why. For all the microscopic, analytical data gathering your Virgo ascendant does in the world, this is the reward. Ruled by Jupiter, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the fundamental place on Earth where you are not investigating, fixing, or analyzing, you are believing. This is where you retreat to find meaning, optimism, and higher purpose that transcends the messy details. This foundational sense of expansive philosophical freedom is not a preference, it is an essential psychological requirement. Without a broad, optimistic, and meaningful inner world, the constant cynical analysis of your third house degrades into a state of debilitating, unbearable, and meaningless internal chaos, causing your Virgo-like mind to collapse under the weight of the pointless, unfixable facts. And so this optimistic, faith-based, and exploratory foundation is the only thing that makes your external analysis worthwhile. And then from that expansive, optimistic, and deeply philosophical inner kingdom where you finally found your why, your creative energy yearns for a tangible, externalized outlet. But this is not the raw, expressive joy of other signs. That Sagittarian truth was just a belief. It was hot air, a grand idea with no form. And so with the fifth house in Capricorn, your joy is a deep, sacred, and almost disciplined act of devotion to mastery. Ruled by Saturn, this is where your abstract philosophical data is transformed into refined, structured exchange with the real world. The Virgo-like need to perfect merges with the Capricorn need to build. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative project clicking perfectly into structure, the beauty of a well-mastered skill, the sheer authority of a perfectly executed plan. Play, for you, is the absorbing process of mastering the art of reality so completely that you and your craft become one authoritative unit. It's the joy of the builder finding the perfect cornerstone, the writer finishing the entire manuscript, or the musician mastering the most difficult piece. This is where your creative will becomes a will to achieve and endure, finding deep and profound satisfaction in making your philosophical thoughts real, useful, and above all else, lasting. And then that sacred, meticulous, and structured standard you set for your creative mastery, it's not a part-time hobby. It becomes the absolute essential template for truth that you must now apply to the messy, unglamorous, and often outdated reality of daily life. But the Capricornian way was rigid, traditional, and slow. And so with the 6th house in Aquarius, your daily life, your work, your health, and your routines is where this ideal is revolutionized. This house is co-ruled by Saturn and Uranus. This is a crucial high-stakes link. Your daily life is a psychological laboratory. Your routine is your experiment. Your work environment is a direct reflection of your ideals. Therefore, a traditional job or a good enough routine or an unexamined dogma is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep psychological and spiritual violation. It is an intolerable psychic lie that shatters your core Virgo need to perfect, making you feel personally scattered, trapped, and deeply inauthentic. And so your drive here is a constant restless quest to find a completely revolutionary way of doing things and to find a new root cause. This isn't about mundane chores. It is the transformative psychological mission to find real systematic power in the mundane by creating better, more humane, and more logical ways of living. And then that intense, innovative, and psychologically detached work that you did, it could have been isolating, impersonal, and often cold. And you have perfected the system, but now you yearn for a grand unifying mystery that the system can't explain. And so with the 7th house in Pisces, your one-on-one relationships are not just a simple meeting of minds. They are a boundless, spiritual, and maybe even creative quest to surrender with another. Ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, this is the arena where your core Virgo-like identity, which lives in a world of facts, boundaries, and perfect details, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of surrender. You are not just drawn to partners who want to fix things. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by a grand, compassionate, and formless philosophy. This is where your identity as a perfecter is dissolved, replaced by a quest for a shared dream. This mirror forces you to stop just analyzing data and finally feel and really submerge into what you believe in. Your endless facts for the first time must dissolve into a singular, compassionate, and shared grace that can serve as a map for a bigger life, one where you can learn the ultimate Virgo paradox, that some things can only be perfected by being left imperfect and accepted for how they are. That expansive, compassionate, and exhilarating quest for surrender was a promise. It was a grand, shared what if, but you are left floating in a boundless Piscean ocean, which, while beautiful, is also passive, vulnerable, vague, and sometimes formless. And so now you are plunged from that boundless ocean of feeling into the hot, fiery, and decisive forge of consequences. And so with the 8th house in Aries, you must prove that shared belief by acting and fighting for it. Ruled by Mars, this is the arena where your analytical, careful, and ever-perfecting Virgo-like nature, which could loathe mistakes and impulsive action, is forced to confront the terrifying, immovable weight of instinct. This is not a house of plans. It is a house of crises and potential, fiery action. And so shared finances, psychological vows, intimacy, taxes, or inheritances are not just abstract concepts to be analyzed from a safe distance. For you, they are battlefields that demand courage, instinct, and immediate action. You have to deal with these head on. Your core mercurial drive is to process, to categorize, to find the perfect risk-free option, but Mars demands is to act now. It's to commit, to fight, and to survive. This is where you are forced, against every fiber of your being, to become an instinctual architect of the depths, learning the fast, messy, and deeply serious work of forcing a transformation. It is the hard, unglamorous, but necessary labor of making the dream real by seizing it, not just analyzing it. And then after the fast, chaotic, and fiery process of fighting for survival in the depths, you have proven your courage. You have survived the crisis. but now you could be exhausted, raw, and ungrounded, left in the ashes of the Aryan fire. And so for you, a Virgo rising, your raw instinct, it's not the point, it's the launch pad for a better, more stable system. So with the 9th house in Taurus, you are dramatically grounded from that fiery density in the calm, clear, patient earth of pure tangible value. And so ruled by Venus, this is your philosophical anchor. This is where your Virgo intellect, having been forced through the Aryan fire, now gets to design an entirely new system from the ground up. You are not just interested in fiery dogma or abstract beliefs. You are driven to find a worldview that is practical, valuable, but also essentially or tangibly real. You build your philosophy not on faith, but on facts or what works or what you can touch, and on radical, simple ideas. You build your worldview through slow, patient, and tangible insights and a grounded, objective perspective, creating a new radical intellectual ground that is vast enough and stable enough to hold your experience and free you from the chaotic analytical world entirely. This is your reward, a philosophy that you can actually live in and that is actually grounded and rooted, which can better support your being. And then that radical, logical, and grounded system that you built, it was perfect, tangible, and impersonal. It was the ultimate freedom of pure practical thought. But a perfect system is just a shell. It's an empty, unfeeling structure that sits silent in a walled garden. And so with the 10th house in Gemini, your public role is to flood that rigid, silent structure with the boundless, chaotic, and communicative ocean of the collective mind. And so ruled by Mercury, which is the same planet as your ascendant, this is the ultimate payoff, but also paradox of your life's work. This is where your Virgo identity, which is the master of facts, data, and perfected singular systems, is called to become a public voice for multiplicity. Your legacy is not a rigid Taurian movement. It is a remarkable ability to translate the complex, the technical, and specialized into a form that the world can understand and to really communicate your findings. You are not just an analyst, you are a translator, a teacher, a communicator. You are the expert who explains the vision, the writer who makes the complex system accessible. Your career is not about climbing one ladder, but building an entire network, proving that the deepest use of intellect is not just in finding a perfect answer, but to share your answers and your insights with everybody. And then that adaptable intellectual and communicative legacy that you built, it was a masterpiece of information. You became the translator, the hub, the network, the contact point. But it was also impersonal. It was all head, no heart. And so a network of data has no loyalty. A connection has no love. But with the 11th house in Cancer, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are powerfully focused into a single feeling point of belonging. Ruled by the moon, this is a direct reaction to the Gemini-like sense of detachment. This is the arena where your core Virgo-like identity, the eternal analyst, the neutral reporter, or the master of impersonal systems is forced to pick a tribe. This is your most difficult challenge, to stop collecting contacts and to actually build a tribe that really comes from the heart. Your network is not a Gemini-like list, it is a Cancerian shell, an army of nurturers, protectors, chosen family, or people who resonate with your heart. This is where your analytical communicative drive is emotionalized. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for debate, they are a call to arms to protect your people. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to talk, but to be the courageous, nurturing heart that starts the revolution and fights for the safety of the dream, and who really builds something with ideas and collectives and communities that are emotionally resonant and that take care of everybody. And then your journey through the all-consuming emotional and protective tribe will lead you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and proud part of your entire being. You have lost your analytical self to the safety of the Cancerian family. And so, with the 12th house in Leo, your practical, humble, and ever-serving Virgo-like mind must confront its secret weapon or its secret kryptonite. It's an unseen, immovable, and radiant ego. Ruled by the sun, this is your subconscious undoing. It is the quiet, persistent, and deeply creative part of you that resists all the humble service that you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of being ordinary or not being special or worthy of the things that you give everybody, or of your hard work not being recognized, or of missing out on the spotlight because some part of you simply refuses to be just a helper. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, deep-seated refusal to be just a cog in the machine, a secret attachment to creative joy and personal pride that brings your constant analytical service, and yet this is also your secret primal life force. It is the unseen radiant heart that allows your mind to serve. This is where you recharge, not through analysis, but through silent creative connection to what makes you feel special before you are reborn into the first house to perfect and serve others once more. This 12th house is really about uncovering that unconscious fear of not being enough and really acknowledging yourself and your contributions as something special. With Libra on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to relate, balance, and mediate. This isn't just a hobby or a preference, it is your core mode of being. This isn't about being indecisive in a stereotypical sense. Rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by finding equilibrium. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet of Venus defines this perspective, but this is not the earthy, self-possessed Venus of Taurus. This is Venus in its airy relational sign, filtering your entire world through a lens of social grace, aesthetic, and interpersonal fairness. You perceive the world as an intricate, beautiful, but fundamentally unbalanced network of relationships, whether interpersonal or with how you relate to the world in general, that can be understood, mediated, and harmonized. The primary way you learn about yourself is by interacting with outside forces and seeing your own identity reflected from the perspective of a mirror. This creates a life path dedicated to relations, justice, and diplomacy, where inefficiency or chaos is secondary to the primary fundamental need for social peace. Injustice, conflict, ugliness, or going it alone is not just an annoyance, it is a deep fundamental threat that feels like a personal failure. Your identity is forged in the act of graceful connection and mediation. This simple, essential truth is about your need to find balance that frames every other area of your life. That inherent, restless, and relational drive, it's a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep and internal problem. A harmonious relationship that is superficial, weak, or vulnerable is, in its own way, fundamentally broken. Peace through accommodation, you learn, is useless if it leaves you powerless, exposed, or at the mercy of outside forces. And so with the second house in Scorpio, your approach to resources is not just about fairness, it's about depth, power, and strategic control. Ruled by Pluto and Mars, your values are processed through the lens of a psychological insight and immovable will. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a toolbox of pleasantries, they are a hidden arsenal, a source of deep security. They provide a deeply felt essential sense of control, resilience, and emotional leverage. This is where the Libra need to harmonize is filtered by the Scorpionic need to empower. You are driven to value skills that create deep bonds, assets that are private, and resources that grant you psychological autonomy. You understand on a core level that a peaceful life is only valuable if it is also a potent one. This need for psychological and material depth is the only thing that gives your social diplomatic energy a purpose, creating a stable, powerful, and impenetrable foundation from which your mind can safely and strategically engage the world. That deep, powerful, and psychologically potent foundation you built is not a place to hide. It is the essential secure fortress that fuels your engagement with the world. The hidden leverage your Scorpionic nature constantly gathers is just a private, silent resource. It is powerful, but it is unexpressed. And so it is your third house in Sagittarius that transforms this silent potency into a full-blown philosophical broadcast. Ruled by Jupiter, your mind is not an investigative tool, it is a philosophical launchpad. Your core Libra need to relate and balance is transformed into an expansive, optimistic, and powerful will to know the higher truth. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are explorations, lessons, and moral quests. This is why a mundane conversation, an audience that is cynical, or a person who evades the big picture is not just a simple annoyance, it feels like a direct, personal, and fundamental threat. It is a cold, invalidating void that shatters the hidden power of your second house and makes your Libra diplomacy feel small and meaningless. Therefore, your communication is a constant, expansive act of creating your own truth, placing your perspective at the broad, optimistic, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure the real overarching meaning is always unflinchingly found. That expansive, philosophical, and constant engagement with the world's higher truths, it's not just a skill, it is energetically scattering and creates a massive chaotic storm of abstract ideas, moral debates, but also sometimes ungrounded beliefs. And so with the fourth house in Capricorn, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary, they are a sacred, structural, and disciplined fortress of your entire life. This is the payoff and this is the anchor. For all the relational, diplomatic, and social energy your Libra ascendant expends in the world, this is the reward. Ruled by Saturn, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one fundamental place on Earth where you are not relating, mediating, or balancing, you are achieving and enduring. This is where you retreat to find structure, discipline, and emotional self-sufficiency that transcends the messy social world. This foundational sense of private structural integrity is not just a preference, it is a fundamental psychological requirement. Without a strong, disciplined, and self-reliant inner world, the constant social analysis of your first house degrades into a state of debilitating, unbearable, and meaningless codependency, causing your Libra mind to collapse under the weight of everybody else's needs. This disciplined, responsible foundation is the only thing that makes your external diplomacy worthwhile. From that structured, disciplined, and deeply self-reliant inner kingdom where you've finally found your anchor, your creative energy yearns for an intellectual, unconventional, and externalized outlet. But this is not the raw, expressive joy of other signs. That Capricornian integrity was just a private structure. It was a fortress or a set of rules with no form. And so with the fifth house in Aquarius, your joy is a deep, sacred, and almost detached act of devotion to the ideal. Ruled by Saturn and Uranus, this is where your structured internal data is transformed into a refined intellectual exchange with the collective. The Libra need to relate merges with the Aquarian need to innovate. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative project clicking perfectly into a social ideal, or the beauty of a well-designed system, the sheer brilliance of a perfectly executed idea that benefits a group. And play for you is the absorbing process of mastering the art of the concept so completely that you and your ideal become one innovative unit. It is the joy of the theorist finding the perfect theory, or the activist designing a perfect protest, or the artist creating art for the future. And this is where your creative will becomes a will to be different and to connect with the tribe, finding deep and profound satisfaction in making your structured thoughts ideal, humane, and above all, forward-thinking. That sacred, intellectual, and systematic ideal that you set for your creative joy is not a part-time hobby. It becomes an absolute essential template for truth that you must now apply to the messy, unglamorous, and often illogical reality of daily life. But the Aquarian way was detached, it was intellectual and systematic. But with the sixth house in Pisces, your daily life, your work, your health, and your routines is where this ideal is dissolved. This house is ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, and this is the crucial high-stakes link. Your daily life is a psychological and spiritual ocean. Your routine is a ritual. Your work environment is a direct reflection of your compassion. It is where you absorb a lot of energy, and therefore, a traditional job or a not good enough routine that lacks meaning or an unexamined dogma or something where you really can't express your creativity or compassion is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep psychological and spiritual violation. It is an intolerable psychic lie that shatters your core Libra need for peace, making you feel personally scattered, victimized, and maybe even inauthentic. Your drive here is a constant restless quest to find a spiritual root cause and to live your day-to-day life by that. And this is not about mundane chores. It is the transformative psychological mission to find real systematic power in the mundane by dissolving the mundane and creating a more compassionate, intuitive, and soulful way of living your day-to-day life. That fluid, compassionate, and often chaotic work you did was an isolating, boundaryless, and deeply absorbent process. You have perfected the art of surrender, and now you yearn for a singular, decisive spark that the Piscean ocean cannot provide. And so with the 7th house in Aries, your one-on-one relationships are not a simple meeting of minds. They are a direct, fiery, and instinctual quest for self. Ruled by Mars, this is the arena where your core Libra identity, which lives in a world of we, balance, and perfect diplomacy, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of me. You are not drawn to partners who just want to accommodate. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by a grand, independent, and self-actualized philosophy. This is where your identity as a mediator is challenged, replaced by a quest for a shared action. This mirror forces you to stop just reflecting others and to finally act on what you believe in. Your endless diplomacy for the first time must confront a singular, decisive, and independent force that serves as a map for a bigger life. One where you learn the ultimate Libra paradox, that true partnership can only be balanced by two whole independent individuals. That fiery, assertive, and exhilarating quest for self-initiation was a declaration. It was the grand, shared what now? But you are left energized by a raw Aryan fire, which while exciting is also impulsive, could be unstable and vague, but also insecure. And now you are plunged from that fiery world of action into the slow, earthy, and methodical forge of consequences. And so with the 8th house in Taurus, you must prove that shared initiative by building it and sustaining it. Ruled by Venus, which is the same planet as your ascendant, this is the arena where your diplomatic, peace-seeking, and ever-harmonizing Libra nature, which loathes coarseness and material instability, is forced to confront the terrifying, immovable weight of tangible value or the lack thereof. This is not a house of ideas. It is a house of assets. And so shared finances, deep psychological vows, intimacy, taxes, and inheritances are not just abstract concepts to be debated from a safe distance. They are battlefields that demand patience, methodical planning, stability, and immediate sensual grounding. Your core Venus drive is to create peace, to beautify, and to find the perfect risk-free relationship. Taurus's demand is to build now, to commit, to own, and to endure. And this is where you are forced against every fiber of your being to become a sensual architect of the depths, learning the slow, messy, and profoundly serious work of forcing a transformation. It is the hard, steady, and necessary labor of making the dream real by grounding to it, not just relating to it, but be willing to go deep in order to find that grounding. After the slow, methodical, and earthly process of fighting for security in the depths, you have now proven your endurance. You have survived the crisis, but you are stabilized, secure, and grounded, left in the rich, fertile soil of the Taurian world. For you, a Libra, pure security, that's not the point. It is a launch pad for a better, more connected system. And so with the 9th house in Gemini, you are dramatically liberated from that earthly density and propelled into a vast, clear, curious air of pure, tangible information. Ruled by Mercury, this is your ultimate philosophical anchor. This is where your Libra's intellect, having been forced through the Taurian soil, gets to design an entirely new system from their ideas. You are not interested in earthly dogma or abstract beliefs. You are driven to find a worldview that is practical, versatile, but also intellectually stimulated. You build your philosophy not on faith, but on facts, or on what you observe, or what changes, or on what you communicate, and on a radical, simple ideal. You build your worldview through fast, curious, and tangible insights and a data-driven, objective perspective, creating a new radical intellectual ground that is vast enough and changeable enough to hold your experience and free you from the chaotic social world entirely. This is your reward, a philosophy you can debate. That radical, logical, and data-driven system that you built was a perfect, versatile, and impersonal architecture. It was the ultimate freedom of pure practical thought. But a perfect system is just a shell, an empty, unfeeling structure that sits silent in its busy garden. With the 10th house in Cancer, though, your public role is to flood that information-filled, logical structure with the deep, protective, and intuitive ocean of the collective heart. Ruled by the moon, this is the ultimate payoff and the paradox of your life's work. This is where your Libra-like identity, the master of facts, diplomacy, and perfected singular relationships, is called to become the public voice for nurturing. Your legacy is not one of pure communication. It is one where your remarkable ability is to translate the complex, the technical, and the confusing into a form that the world can feel. You are not just a diplomat, you are a protector, a public caregiver, and a communicator. You are the expert who explains the vision, and the leader who makes the complex systems feel like home. Your career is not about climbing the ladder, but about building an entire nest, and this proves that the deepest use of diplomacy is not just about finding perfect balance, but to share it with everybody in a way that resonates with the heart, no matter what field you pursue, and no matter what impact that brings to the world. While your Libra rising likes to keep things light and polite, this is where you can truly go deep within your heart and sing it to the world. That adaptive, emotional, and nurturing legacy you built was a masterpiece of care. You became the nurturer, the protector, the hub, and the public home. But it was also insular. It was all heart and no fire. A network of nurturers has no radiance. A connection has no pride. And so with the 11th house in Leo, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are powerfully galvanized into a single radiant point of joy. Ruled by the sun, this is a direct relation to the Cancerian defensiveness. This is the arena where your core Libra identity, the eternal mediator, the balanced partner, or the master of we, is forced to take center stage. This is one of your most difficult challenges, to stop reflecting on contacts and build a pride. Your network is not a Cancerian shell, it is a Leo-like stage, an army of creative, loyal, and expressive individuals. This is where your diplomatic relational drive is dignified. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for balance, they are a call to arms to protect the joy of your people. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to nurture, but to be the courageous creative heart that starts the revolution and fights for the pride of the dream. And finally, your journey through the all-consuming, radiant, and expressive tribe leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and anxious part of your entire being. You've lost your balanced self to the creative joy of the Leo-like stage, and so with the 12th house in Virgo, your social, graceful, and ever-harmonizing Libra mind must confront its secret kryptonite, an unseen, persistent, and analytical critic. Ruled by Mercury, this is your subconscious undoing. This is the quiet, persistent, and deeply practical part of you that resists all the effortless social grace that you constantly crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of being imperfect or not being efficient, or of getting the details wrong, or of missing the flaw in the harmony because some part of you just simply refuses to just be polite. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, deep-seated refusal to be just a face, a secret attachment to practical service and functional perfection that brings your constant social diplomacy to a grinding halt. And yet, this is also your secret primal life force. It is the unseen analytical heart that allows your mind to balance. This is where you recharge, not through socialization, but through silent analytical connection to what makes you functional before you are reborn into the first house to harmonize and relate once more. With Scorpio on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to probe, excavate, and transform. This is not a hobby or a preference, it is your core mode of being. This isn't about being secretive or intense in the stereotypical sense. Rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by excavating the truth. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planets of Pluto and Mars define this perspective, filtering your entire world through a lens of tangible power, psychological strategy, and functional transformation. You perceive the world as an intricate, beautiful, but fundamentally compromised mechanism, a surface layer hiding a deeper, more potent reality that can be understood, navigated, and transformed. The primary way you learn about yourself is by testing your own resilience, confronting power, and seeing the tangible results of your own psychological metamorphosis. This creates a life dedicated to a truth, a power, or a mission, where superficiality, polite fictions, or good enough is not just an annoyance, it is a deep fundamental threat that feels like a personal failure. Your identity is forged in the act of powerful application and transformation. To be weak, wrong, superficial, or powerless is a fundamental denial of your very being. And this simple, essential truth is about your need to probe and control things that frames other area of your life. That inherent, restless, and investigative drive is a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. A perfect deep truth that is cynical, small, or trapping is still in its own way fundamentally broken. Perfection of truth, you learn, is useless if it creates paranoia, limitation, or simple bad faith. And so with the second house in Sagittarius, your approach to resources, it's not just about power, it's about freedom, meaning, and optimism. Ruled by Jupiter, your values are processed through a lens of philosophical, expansive, and moral grace. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a toolbox of hidden assets, they are a philosophical launch pad. They provide a deeply felt essential sense of meaning, expansion, and freedom. This is where the Scorpionic need to control is filtered by the Sagittarian need to expand. You are driven to value skills that create meaning, assets that are abundant, and a budget that is optimistic and generous. You understand on a core level that a powerful system is only valuable if it creates freedom, not just control. This need for philosophical and moral balance is the only thing that gives your scattered investigative energy a purpose, creating a stable, optimistic, and morally sound foundation from which your mind can safely and pleasantly engage the world. That deep, expansive, and optimistic foundation you built, it's not a place to hide. It is the essential, secure launchpad that fuels your public engagement. The abundant data that your Sagittarian nature constantly gathers is just a philosophical script, a collection of grand beliefs. It is optimistic, but it is not tangible. It is your third house in Capricorn that transforms this pleasant script into a full-blown structural probe. Ruled by Saturn, your mind is not just a university, it is a psychological command center with structure. Your core Scorpionic need to know and control is transformed into a serious, disciplined, and powerful will to get to know the root structure. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are strategies, maneuvers, and constructions. This is why a superficial conversation, an audience that is frivolous, or a person who evades the point is not just a simple annoyance, it is like a direct, personal, and fundamental threat. It is a cold, invalidating void that shatters the optimistic fiction of your second house and makes your Scorpionic analysis feel useless. Therefore, your communication is a constant, serious act of creating and constructing your own truth from the ground up, placing your perspective at the deep, authoritative, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure the real structure is always unflinchingly found. That intense, structural, and constant engagement with the world's hidden architectures is not just a skill, it is energetically exhausting and creates a massive chaotic storm of rigid, high stakes, and cynical feedback. And so with the fourth house in Aquarius, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary, they are a sacred, intellectual, and objective launchpad for your entire life. This is the payoff and this is the why. For all of that microscopic, investigative, and power-seeking your Scorpio ascendant does in the world, this is the reward. Ruled by Saturn and Uranus, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one fundamental place on Earth where you are not investigating, probing, or transforming. You are detaching. This is where you retreat to find intellectual freedom, objective ideals, and a higher purpose that transcends the messy emotional world. This foundational sense of expansive intellectual freedom, it's not just a preference. It is a fundamental psychological requirement. Without a broad, objective, and humane inner world, that constant cynical analysis of your third house degrades into a state of debilitating, unbearable, and meaningless internal paranoia, causing your scorpionic mind to collapse under the weight of the pointless, unfixable power dynamics. This objective, ideal-based foundation is the only thing that makes your external investigation worthwhile. From that expansive, objective, and deeply intellectual inner kingdom where you've finally found your why, your creative energy yearns for a tangible but externalized outlet. This is not the raw expressive joy of other signs. The Aquarian truth was just an ideal. It was hot air, a grand theory with no form. And so with the fifth house in Pisces, your joy is a deep, sacred, and almost formless act of devotion to surrender. Ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, this is where your abstract intellectual data is transformed into a refined spiritual exchange or creative exchange with the real world. The scorpionic need to transform merges with the Piscean need to dissolve. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative project dissolving perfectly into a universal feeling, the beauty of a well-understood emotion, the sheer empathy of a perfectly executed act of compassion. Play for you is the absorbing process of mastering the art of transcendence so completely that you and your craft become one compassionate unit. It is the joy of the artist finding the perfect evocative color, the writer finishing the entire soulful manuscript, the musician mastering the most transcendent piece. This is where your creative will becomes a will to dream and to heal, finding a deep, profound satisfaction in making your intellectual thoughts real, compassionate, and above all else, boundless. The boundless spiritual standard you've set for your creative mastery, it's not just a part-time hobby. It becomes the sharp, actionable template for your truth that you must now apply to the raw, unpolished, and urgent reality of daily life. While the Piscean influence was diffuse and indirect, your sixth house in Aries demands immediate execution. Your daily existence, your labor, your physical vitality, your methods is where this ideal catches fire. This house is ruled by Mars, your co-ruler, creating a high-stakes link where your daily life becomes a testing ground for your strength. Your routine is your crusade. Your work environment is a direct projection of your autonomy. Therefore, a stagnant job, a compliant routine, or a slow bureaucratic process is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep, visceral, and instinctual violation. It is an active suppression of your will that threatens your core scorpionic need for agency, making you feel physically agitated, blocked, and defensive. Your drive here is a constant restless hunger to pioneer a new method of functioning. This is not just about checking boxes, it is the aggressive, vital mission to inject agency in the mundane by carving out a bolder, faster, and more independent way of living. That intense, instinctual, and psychologically driven work you did was an isolating, individual, and often chaotic process. You have perfected the art of individual mission, and now you yearn for a grand unifying peace that the battle cannot provide. And so with the seventh house in Taurus, your one-on-one relationships are not a simple meeting of minds. They are a stable, earthly, and sensual quest for sanctuary with another. Ruled by Venus, this is the arena where your core scorpionic identity, which lives in a world of crisis, power dynamics, and hidden complexities, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of simplicity. You are not drawn to partners who just want to fight or analyze. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by a grand, grounded, and tangible philosophy. This is where your identity as a transformer is grounded and replaced by a quest for a shared but stable reality. This mirror forces you to stop just excavating data and to finally feel what is physically real and grounding. Your endless intensity for the first time must settle into a singular, stable, and shared grace that can serve as a map for a simpler life. One where you learn the ultimate scorpionic paradox that some things can only be controlled by being left in peace. That stable, grounded, and sometimes exhilarating quest for peace was a promise. It was the grand shared what is, but you are left resting in a peaceful Taurian garden, which, while beautiful, is also passive, silent, vague, and static. Now you are plunged from that silent garden of feeling into the fast, airy, and decisive forge of consequences. With the 8th house in Gemini, you must prove that shared stability by articulating and analyzing it. Ruled by Mercury, this is the arena where your deep, silent, and ever-transforming scorpionic nature, which loathes superficiality and abhors intellectual games, is now forced to confront the terrifying, immovable weight of data and information and communication. This is not a house of silent vows. It is a house of questions. Shared finances, deep psychological vows, intimacy, taxes, and inheritances are not abstract concepts to be felt from a safe distance. They are battlefields of information that demand curiosity, articulation, and immediate intellectual processing. Your core Plutonian drive is to merge, to feel, and to know on a gut level, but Mercury's demand is to talk now, to define, to question, and to survive. And this is where you are forced against every fiber of your being to become an intellectual architect of the depths, learning that fast, messy, and profoundly serious work of forcing a transformation. It is the cerebral, communicative, and necessary labor of making the dream real by articulating it, not just feeling it. After the fast, chaotic, and intellectual process of fighting for survival in the depths, you have proven your mind, you have survived the data storm, but you are now mentally busy and ungrounded, left in the ashes of the Geminian debate. For you as Scorpio, raw information is not the point. It is a launch pad for a better, more emotional system. And so with the 9th house in Cancer, you are dramatically liberated from that airy density and grounded in the calm, clear, intuitive ocean of pure intuitive feeling. Ruled by the moon, this is your ultimate philosophical anchor. This is where your scorpionic intellect has been forced through the Gemini storm, and this gets to design an entirely new system. You are not interested in airy dogma or abstract beliefs. You are driven to find a worldview that is safe, protective, and emotionally real and resonant. You build your philosophy not on faith like a Sagittarius, but on feelings, on what works, what you can nurture, and on heartfelt, resonant ideas. You build a worldview through heartfelt, emotionally charged intuitive insights and a grounded emotional perspective, creating a new radical emotional ground that is vast and safe enough to hold your experience and free you from the chaotic analytical world entirely. This is your reward, a philosophy that feels like home. That radical, emotional, and grounded system you built was a perfect, protective, and very vulnerable architecture. It was the ultimate freedom of pure emotional thought, but a perfect system is just a shell, an empty, unfeeling structure that sits silent in a walled garden. And so with the 10th house in Leo, your public role is to flood that rigid, silent structure with the boundless, expressive, and creative ocean of the collective stage. Ruled by the sun, this is the ultimate payoff but paradox of your life's work. This is where your scorpionic identity, which is the master of power, depth, and perfected hidden systems, is now called to become a public voice of radiance. Your legacy is not a Cancerian shell. It is your remarkable ability to translate the complex, the deep, and the specialized into a form that shines bright, a form that embraces just being, or a form that the world can admire and see as you are ruled by the sun in this house. You are not just a transformer, you are a leader, a performer, a charismatic authority. You are the expert who explains the vision, the writer who makes the complex system compelling. Your career is not about climbing one ladder, but about building an entire stage, proving that the deepest use of the intellect is not to find the perfect answer, but to shine with it. That adaptive, creative, and expressive legacy you built was a masterpiece of expression. You became the leader, the hub, the stage, but it also needs refinement. It was all heart, no function. And so a network of admirers has no utility. A connection has no craft. And so with the 11th house in Virgo, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are powerfully focused into a single practical point of service. Ruled by Mercury, this is a direct reaction to the Leo grandiosity. This is the arena where your scorpionic identity, the eternal transformer, the power broker, the master of hidden systems is forced to pick a process. This is your most difficult challenge, to stop collecting admirers and build an efficient team. Your network is not a Leo-like stage, it is a Virgo-like workshop, an army of specialists, helpers, and chosen craftsmen. This is where your investigative, transformative drive is given an analytical purpose. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for show, they are a call to arms to serve your people. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to lead, but to be the courageous, analytical heart that starts the revolution and fights for the perfection of the dream, and who can focus on the logistics and see the practical details to make that happen. And then finally, your journey through the all-consuming, practical, and perfecting tribe leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and social part of your entire being. You have lost your transformative self to the safety of the Virgo system. So with the 12th house in Libra, your intense, powerful, and ever-transforming scorpionic mind must confront its secret kryptonite, an unseen, persistent, and harmonizing force. Ruled by Venus, this is your subconscious undoing. This is the quiet, persistent, and deeply relational part of you that resists all the intensity and crisis that you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, maybe a feeling of being unfair or causing conflict, or your hard work being unbalanced, or of missing out on peace because some part of you simply refuses to just be a warrior. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, deep-seated refusal to be just an isolate. It's a secret attachment to social grace and shared beauty that brings your constant investigative services to a grinding heart. And yet, this is also your secret primal life force. It is the unseen, harmonizing heart that allows your mind to transform. This is where you recharge, not through analysis, but through silent relational connection to what makes you feel balanced before you are reborn in the first house to probe and transform once more. With Sagittarius on the Ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by a non-negotiable instinctual drive to explore, expand, and find meaning. This is not a hobby or a preference, it is your core mode of being. This isn't about being careless in a stereotypical sense, rather it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by seeking a higher truth. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet Jupiter defines this perspective, but this is not the watery, boundless Jupiter of Pisces. This is the Jupiter in its fiery directional sign of Sagittarius, filtering your entire world through a lens of tangible philosophy, optimistic faith, and moral processes. You probably love to have fun as well. You perceive the world as an intricate, beautiful, but fundamentally limited mechanism that can be understood, explored, and transcended. The primary way you learn about yourself is by testing your own boundaries, applying your beliefs, and seeing the tangible results of your expansion. This creates a life path dedicated to a philosophy, a journey, or a system of truth where stagnation, dogma, or good enough is not just an annoyance, it is a visceral existential threat that feels like a personal failure. Your identity is forged in the act of optimistic application and exploration. To be useless, wrong, limited, or stagnant is a fundamental negation of your very being. This simple, non-negotiable truth about your need to expand things frames every other area of your life. That inherent restless and expansive drive is a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. A perfect philosophy that is broke, insecure, or unrealistic is in its own way fundamentally broken. Perfection of truth, you learn, is useless if it creates instability, dependency, or simple non-functional idealism. And so with the second house in Capricorn, your approach to resources is not just about ideals, it's about structure, discipline, and tangible achievement. Ruled by Saturn, your values are processed through the lens of practical, ambitious, and structural grace. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a toolbox of travel tickets, they are an architectural blueprint for a fortress. They must provide a visceral, non-negotiable sense of competence, security, and structure. This is where the Sagittarian need to expand is filtered by the Capricornian need to build. You are driven to value skills that create authority, assets that are enduring, and a budget that is realistic and ambitious. You understand on a core level that a perfect philosophy is only valuable if it rests on a solid foundation, not just on ideals. The need for structural and material integrity is the only thing that gives your scattered, expansive energy a purpose, creating a stable, secure, and socially functional foundation from which your mind can safely and impressively serve the world. That deep, structural, and ambitious foundation you built is not a place to hide. It is the essential, secure fortress that fuels your public engagement. The structured competence your Capricorn second house nature constantly gathers is just a private, silent resource. It is competent, but it is traditional and structured. It is your third house in Aquarius that alchemizes this silent structure into a full-blown intellectual broadcast. Ruled by Saturn and Uranus, your mind is not just an office, it is a psychological think tank. Your core Sagittarian need to know and expand is transformed into an innovative, objective, and powerful will to know and create a higher system that is from the future. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are experiments, theorems, and societal probes. This is why a superficial conversation or an audience that is dogmatic or a person who evades this ideal is not just a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct, personal, and existential threat. It is a cold, invalidating void that shatters the structural reality of your second house and makes your Sagittarian first house expansion feel useless. Therefore, your communication is about innovating. It's about thinking of the next unique step. This is how you filter and interact with the world. And it is a constant piercing act of creating your own truth, placing your perspective at the detached, intellectual, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure the real innovative system is always unflinchingly found. That intense, innovative, and constant engagement with the world's hidden systems, it's not just a skill, it can be energetically exhausting and creates a massive chaotic storm of psychological clutter, social detachment, and intellectual feedback. With the fourth house in Pisces, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary, they are the sacred, boundless, and spiritual launch pad for your entire life. This is the payoff and this is the why. For all of the microscopic, intellectual, and data gathering that your third house does in the world, this is the reward. Ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one non-negotiable place on Earth where you are not just investigating, debating, or systems building. You are believing, merging, and dissolving. This is where you retreat to find meaning, compassion, and a higher purpose that transcends the messy details. This foundational sense of expansive spiritual freedom, it's not just a preference, it is a non-negotiable psychological requirement. Without a broad, compassionate, and formless inner world, the constant detached analysis of your third house grades into a state of debilitating, unbearable, and meaningless internal chaos, causing your Sagittarian mind to collapse under the weight of pointless, unfixable facts. This compassionate, faith-based foundation is the only thing that makes your external analysis worthwhile. From that expansive, compassionate, and deeply spiritual inner kingdom where you finally found your why, your creative energy yearns for a direct, independent outlet. But this is not the raw, expressive joy of other signs. That Piscean truth was just a feeling. It was a boundless ocean or a grand idea with no direction. With the 5th house in Aries, your joy is a deep, instinctual, and almost primal act of devotion to enjoy life through movement, whether literal or metaphorical. Ruled by Mars, this is where your abstract philosophical vision is ignited into vast, instinctual collision with the real world. The Sagittarian need to explore merges with the Arian need to initiate. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative project springing immediately into action, the beauty of a solo risk, potentially exercising your way to joy, or the sheer authority of a self-determined move. And play for you is the absorbing process of mastering the art of courage, no matter what it is that you do, whether it's art or movement, so completely that you and your act become one singular force. It's the joy of the pioneering breaking ground, the artist making the first mark, the leader taking the first step. This is where your creative will becomes a will to win and to start, finding deep satisfaction in making your philosophical thoughts real, instinctual, and above all else new. That bold, instinctual standard you set for your creative expression is not a fleeting impulse. It becomes an absolute, tangible requirement for truth that you must now apply to the practical, resource-driven reality of daily life. While the Arian influence was rapid, the 6th house in Taurus demands endurance. Your daily existence, your labor, your physical body, your resources is where this ideal is stabilized and grounded. This house is ruled by Venus. This is a critical, tangible link. Your daily life is an investment in worth. Your routine is your asset. Your work environment is a direct projection of your peace. Therefore, a turbulent job, a routine that lacks substance, or a hurried, unsustainably paced lifestyle is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep sensory violation. It is the intolerable instability that undercuts your core Sagittarian need for freedom, making you feel physically depleted, insecure, and also unmoored. Your drive here is a steady effort to establish unshakable security. This is not about mundane chores. It is the pragmatic mission to build real, compound value in the mundane by creating a slower, more deliberate, and more resourceful way of living. That intense, stable, and psychologically grounding work you did was a steady, grounding, and often slow process. You have perfected the system, and now you yearn for a grand, exciting idea that the system cannot explain, and you want to share it with another. And so with the 7th house in Gemini, your one-on-one relationships are not just a simple meeting of minds. They are fast, chaotic, and an intellectual quest for data. Ruled by Mercury, this is the arena where your core Sagittarian identity, which lives in a world of one big truth, faith, optimism, and perfected philosophy, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of practical facts through another. You are not drawn to partners who want to believe. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by a grand, curious, and communicative philosophy of questions. This is where your identity as a philosopher is dismantled, replaced by a quest for a shared dialogue. This mirror forces you to stop just preaching the data and to finally process what you believe in. Your endless philosophy for the first time must dissolve into a singular, curious, and shared conversation that can serve as a map for a bigger shared life. One where you can learn the ultimate Sagittarian paradox, that a perfect truth can only be perfected by being questioned and analyzed against the data, and this is what you learn when you bond with another to really balance your perspective with the big picture and also the facts. That expansive, curious, and exhilarating quest for information with another was a promise. It was the grand shared what if. But you are left floating in a boundless Gemini ocean of facts, which, while beautiful and curious, is also busy, noisy, could be overstimulating and communicative, but it could also lack emotional depth. And so now you are plunged from that boundless ocean of thought into the deep, protective, and decisive ocean of consequences. And so with the 8th house in Cancer, you must prove that shared idea by feeling and protecting it. Ruled by the moon, this is the arena where your expansive, optimistic, and ever-expanding Sagittarius nature, which loathes limitation and emotional need, is forced to confront the terrifying, immovable weight of vulnerability. This is not a house of plans, it is a house of crises. Shared finances, deep psychological vows, intimacy, taxes, and inheritances are not abstract concepts to be debated from a safe distance. They are battlefields that demand emotional courage, intuition, and immediate protection. Your core Jupiterian drive is to expand, to be free, and to find the next option. The moon's demand is to commit now, to protect, to feel, and to survive. This is where you are forced against every fiber of your being to become an emotional architect of the depths, learning the deep, intuitive, and highly emotional work of feeling a transformation. It is the intuitive, heartfelt, and necessary labor of making the dream real by securing it, not just debating it. And then after the fast, chaotic, and emotional process of fighting for survival in the depths through your feeling, you have really proven your emotional courage. You have survived the crisis. But you are emotionally raw and protective, left in the protective shell of the Cancerian ocean. And for you, as Sagittarius rising, emotional security is not the point. It is the launch pad for a better, more radiant system. So with the 9th house in Leo, you are liberated from the watery density and grounded in the bright, clear, and creative fire of pure, tangible joy. Ruled by the sun, this is your ultimate philosophical anchor. This is where your Sagittarian intellect, having been forced through the Cancerian ocean, gets to design an entirely new system. You are not interested in emotional dogma or abstract beliefs. You are driven to find a worldview that is creative, joyful, but also personally resonant. You build your philosophy not on faith, but on joy or what shines, on what you can create, and on radical, simple ideals. You build your worldview through slow, patient, and creative insights in a radiant, objective perspective, manufacturing a new, radical personal ground that is vast enough and proud enough to hold your experience and free you from the emotional heaviness of the world entirely. This is your reward. It's a philosophy you can live in and embody. That radical, creative, and expressive system you built was a perfect, radiant, and personalized architecture for your life's philosophy. It was the ultimate freedom of pure, joyful thought, but a perfect system is just a shell. It's a radiant but potentially empty structure that sits proudly on the throne, but possibly without a system or refinement. And so with the 10th house in Virgo, your public role is to flood that radiant structure with the meticulous, detailed, and analytical ocean of the collective process. Ruled by Mercury, this is the ultimate payoff and the paradox of your life's work. This is where your Sagittarian identity, which is the master of faith, expansion, and a perfected singular truth and the big picture, is called to become the public voice for multiplicity and analysis, and you really get to the nitty-gritty of the details. Your legacy is not a radiant Leo-like monument. It is your ability to translate the complex, the philosophical, and the specialized into a tangible form that the world can use through meticulous analysis. You are not just a philosopher. You are an analyst, a teacher, a craftsman. You are the expert who explains the vision, the writer who makes the complex system accessible, and your career is not about climbing one ladder, but about building an entire system, proving that the deepest use of your intellect is not just to find the perfect answer, but to perfect it for everybody. That adaptive, intellectual, and analytical legacy you built was a masterpiece of information. You became the translator, the hub, the process, but it could have also been impersonal. It was all head, no harmony. A network of data has no peace. A connection has no grace. And so with the 11th house in Libra, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are galvanized and graced into a single feeling point of balance. Ruled by Venus, this is the direct reaction to the Virgo analysis. This is the arena where your core Sagittarian identity, the eternal philosopher, the optimistic reporter, and the master of personal philosophies begins to execute connection to the larger vision through their social grace. This could be a very difficult challenge to stop collecting contacts and to build true relationships. Your network is not a Virgo-like list. It is a Libra courtroom, an army of diplomats, artists, and chosen partners. This is where your expansive philosophical drive is socialized. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for debate. They are a call to arms to harmonize your people. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to talk, but to be the balanced, harmonizing heart that starts the revolution and fights for the beauty of the dream. And finally, your journey through the all-consuming social and graceful tribe leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and proud part of your entire being. You have lost your philosophical self to the peace of the Libra relationship. So with the 12th house in Scorpio, your practical, expansive, and ever-serving Sagittarian mind must confront its secret kryptonite, an unseen, immovable, and intense ego. Ruled by Pluto and Mars, this is your subconscious undoing. This is the quiet, intense, and deeply investigative part of you that resists all of the optimistic service you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of being powerless, of not being in control, of your hard work being unrecognized, or missing out on the deep truth because some part of you simply refuses to just be a helper. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, unshakable refusal to be just a cog in the machine, a secret attachment to the psychological power and personal truth that brings your constant, expansive service to a grinding halt. And yet, this is also your secret primal life force. It is the unseen, investigative heart that allows your mind to serve. This is where you recharge, not through expansion, but through silent, investigative connection to what makes you feel powerful before you are reborn into the first house to expand and serve and to be optimistic once more. With Capricorn on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to build, achieve, take responsibility, or at the very least, work within a structure. This is not a hobby or a preference. It is your core mode of being. This isn't about being achievement-driven or cold in the stereotypical sense. Rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by making things better, more efficient, and more functional. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planet of Saturn defines this perspective, filtering your entire world through a lens of tangible details, functional systems, and practical processes. You perceive the world as an intricate, beautiful, but fundamentally unstructured mechanism that can be understood, categorized, and mastered. The primary way you learn about yourself is by honing your skills, applying them in useful ways, and seeing the tangible results of your achievements. This creates a life path dedicated to a craft, a service, or a system where inefficiency, chaos, or good enough is not just an annoyance, it is a deep, fundamental threat that feels like a personal failure. Your identity is forged in the act of thoughtful application and structural integrity. To be useless, wrong, incompetent, or unprepared is a fundamental denial of your very being. This simple, essential truth about your need to build things frames every other area of your life. That inherent restless and structural drive is a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. A perfect system that is stagnant, illogical, or obsolete is still in its own way fundamentally broken. Perfection of function, you learn, is useless if it creates restriction, conformity, or simple boredom. And so with the second house in Aquarius, your approach to resources is not just about function, it's about experimentation, intellect, and the future. Ruled by Saturn and Uranus, your values are processed through the lens of a detached, scientific, and humanitarian assessment. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a toolbox of useful items. They are a laboratory of radical potential. They must provide a deeply felt, essential sense of autonomy, eccentricity, and invention. This is where the Capricornian need to build is filtered by an Aquarian need to disrupt. You are driven to value skills that challenge the norms, assets that are cutting edge, and a budget that supports collective goals in some way. You understand on a core level that a perfect system is only valuable if it creates liberation, not just efficiency. This need for intellectual and systematic freedom is the only thing that gives your structural energy a purpose, creating a stable, unconventional, and objectively brilliant foundation from which your mind can safely and progressively serve the world. That innovative, intellectual, and structural foundation you built is not a place to hide. It is the essential, secure laboratory that fuels your public engagement and fuels your material world. The data that your Aquarian nature constantly gathers is just a social script or a collection of cold facts. It is logical, but it is not alive. It is your third house in Pisces that transforms this rigid script into a fluid, intuitive stream. Ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, your mind is not just a database, it is a psychological absorbing sponge. Your core Capricorn need to know and build is transformed into a porous, boundless, and imaginative will to absorb the atmosphere around you. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are impressions, currents, and subtle visualizations. This is why a harsh conversation, an environment that is sterile, or a person who speaks in rigid absolutes is not just a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct, personal, and fundamental drain. It is a dry, unfeeling void that dehydrates the imaginative flow of your second house and makes your Capricorn first house analysis feel lifeless. Therefore, your communication is a constant fluid act of sensing the mood, placing your intuition at the deep, nebulous, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure the message is always effortlessly absorbed. But that porous, intuitive, and constant engagement with the world's subtle moods is not just a skill, it is energetically confusing and creates a massive foggy mist of psychological drift, social fatigue, and boundless feedback. And so with the fourth house in Aries, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary, they are the singular, combative, and fiery fortress of your entire life. This is the payoff and this is the why. For all the reserved, structural, and patient climbing your Capricorn Ascendant does in the world, this is the reward. Ruled by Mars, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one fundamental place on Earth where you are not just waiting, serving, or absorbing, you are conquering. This is where you retreat to find autonomy, friction, and sharp agency that cuts through the fog. This foundational sense of urgent defensive freedom, it's not just a preference, it is a fundamental psychological requirement. Without a distant, courageous, and independent inner world, the constant porous absorption of your third house degrades into a state of debilitating, overwhelming, and passive internal paralysis, causing your Capricorn mind to collapse under the weight of vague, unaddressed needs. This active warrior-like foundation is the only thing that makes your external analysis worthwhile. From that sharp, defensive, and deeply courageous inner fortress where you've finally found your fight, your creative energy yearns for a tangible, externalized outlet. But this is not the fast, frantic expression of other signs. That Aryan fire was not just igniting, it was heat, a sudden spark with no weight. And so, with the fifth house in Taurus, your joy is a deep, slow, and almost stubborn act of devotion to pleasure. Ruled by Venus, this is where your reactive, instinctual fire is transformed into a calm sensory exchange with the real world. The Capricorn need to build merges with the Taurian need to sustain. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative project growing organically in a garden, or the texture of raw materials, the sheer value of a beautifully preserved moment. Play for you is the absorbing process of enjoying the art of reality so completely that you and your craft become one stable but valuable unit. It's the joy of the gardener touching the soil, the painter mixing the pigment, the collector finding the rare object. This is where your creative will becomes a will to possess and savor, finding deep, deep satisfaction in making your instinctual sparks real, tactile, and above all, consistent. That sacred sensory and structural standard you set for your creative pleasure is not a part-time hobby. It becomes the absolute essential temple for the quality that you must now apply to the busy, scattered, and often noisy reality of daily life. But the Taurian way was still, fixed and slow. And so with the sixth house in Gemini, your daily life, your work, your health, and your routines is where this ideal is mobilized. The house is ruled by Mercury, and this is a crucial high-stakes link. Your daily life is a kinetic puzzle. Your routine is your circuitry. Your work environment is a direct reflection of your agility, therefore a monotonous job or a one-track routine that is repetitive or a silent office is not just a mere annoyance, it is a deep psychological and nervous violation. It is an intolerable static trap that shatters your core Capricorn need to build, making you feel personally stifled, bored, or even deeply restless. Your drive here is a constant curious quest to find the connecting thread. This isn't just about mundane chores, it is the adaptive mental mission to find the real functional dexterity in the mundane by creating a smarter, more variable, and more interesting way of living. That adaptive multitasking and mentally active work you did was a scattering, fragmenting, and often buzzing process. You have dissected the system, and now you yearn for a soft, protective quiet that the system cannot provide, but only another can provide. And so, with the seventh house in Cancer, your one-on-one relationships are not just a simple meeting of minds, they are a sheltering, emotional, and nostalgic quest for safety in another. Ruled by the moon, this is the arena where your core Capricorn identity, which lives in a world of structure, dryness, and maybe even boundaries, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of vulnerability. You are not drawn to partners who just want to talk fast. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by a deep, cyclic, and protective emotional rhythm. This is where your identity as a builder is softened, replaced by a quest for a shared shell. This mirror forces you to stop just processing data and to finally care about what you have built. Your endless fragments for the first time must dissolve into a singular, nurturing, and shared bond that can serve as a nest for a bigger life, one where you learn the ultimate Capricorn paradox, that some things can only be protected by being held gently. That sheltering, nurturing, and protective quest for safety was a comfort. It was the soft, shared nest, but you are left floating in a safe Cancerian share, which, while cozy, is also private, insular, quiet, and maybe even retreating. And so now you are pushed from that safe shell of care into the hot, dramatic, and demanding spotlight of consequences. So with the 8th house in Leo, you must prove that shared bond by burning and creating for it. Ruled by the sun, this is the arena where your structural, careful, and ever-reserved Capricorn nature, which loathes attention and drama for the sake of it, is forced to confront the terrifying, immovable weight of having pride. This is not a house of comfort. It is a house of vitality. So shared finances, deep psychological vows, intimacy, taxes, and inheritances are not soft concepts to be nurtured. They are stages that demand heart, ego, and immediate visibility. Your core Saturnian drive is to repress, to manage, and to keep the head down, but the sun's demand is to be seen, to express, to dominate, and to live. And so this is where you are forced, against every fiber of your being, to become the radiant sovereign of the depths, learning that bold, performative, and deeply serious work of asserting your will. It is the hard, exposing, and necessary labor of keeping the heart beating by owning it, not just hiding it. After that bold, dramatic, and fiery process of asserting your will in the depths, you have proven your heart. You have survived the exposure, but you are exhausted, theatrical, and maybe a little bit unrefined, left in the heart of the Leo performance. And so for you, a Capricorn, raw drama is not the point. It is the raw material for a better, more efficient system. But with the 9th house in Virgo, you are dramatically liberated from that fiery ego and grounded in the crisp, clear, analytical nature of pure functional truth. Ruled by Mercury, this is your ultimate philosophical method. This is where your Capricorn intellect, having been forced through the Leo fire, gets to design an entirely new standard. You are not interested in broad generalizations or blind faith. You are driven to find a worldview that is precise, useful, and technically perfect by your own standard. You build your philosophy not on hope like a Sagittarius, but on discernment, critique, details, or even on radical helpful service. You build your worldview through slow, careful, and granular insights and a grounded, skeptical perspective, creating a new, specific intellectual method that is accurate enough and helpful enough to explain your experience and free you from the dramatic, ego-driven world entirely. This is your reward. It's a philosophy that actually works. That precise, critical, and ungrounded method you built was a perfect, functional, and specific toolkit. It was the ultimate freedom of pure, accurate thought. But a perfect tool is just an object, a sharp, critical instrument that sits unused in its sterile box. And so, with the 10th house in Libra, your public role is to soften that rigid, critical instrument with the graceful, social, and harmonizing breeze of the collective aesthetic. Ruled by Venus, this is the ultimate payoff and paradox of your life's work. This is where your Capricorn identity, the master of facts, utility, and perfected solitary standards, is called to become the public face of agreement. Your legacy is not a dry Virgo manual. It is your remarkable ability to package the complex, the critical, and the imperfect into a form that the world finds beautiful. You are not just a critic, you are a mediator, a designer, and a balancer. You are the judge who delivers the verdict, or the artist who frames the reality. Your career is not about doing the work alone, but about creating a partnership or creating harmony, proving that the deepest use of the intellect is not just to be right, but to be fair, balanced, and receptive of and towards everybody. That graceful, diplomatic, and social legacy you built was a masterpiece of presentation. You became the mediator, the face, the balance, but it was also polite. It was all surface and no intensity. A public image has no leverage and a partnership has no power. So with the 11th house in Scorpio, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are powerfully focused into a single piercing point of strategy. Ruled by Pluto and Mars, this is a direct reaction to the Libra pleasantries. This is the arena where your core Capricorn identity, the eternal public servant, the neutral builder, the master of polite structures, is forced to keep a secret, is forced to dive into the depths, and this is your most difficult challenge, to stop pleasing the public and to build a coalition off of true depth. Your network is not a Libra party, it is a scorpionic underground, a circle of strategists, power players, and chosen confidants. This is where your structural authoritative drive is intensified. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for display. They are a bid for control and to transform your circle and to really bond with somebody deeply. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to smile, but to be the psychological investigative force that uncovers the shadow and fights for the power of the group. And finally, your journey through the intense, strategic, and transformative underground leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and hopeful part of your entire being. You have lost your structural self to the gravity of the scorpionic depths. But with the 12th house in Sagittarius, your practical, stoic, and ever-building Capricorn mind must confront its secret savior, an unseen, boundless, and believing spirit. Ruled by Jupiter, this is your subconscious sanctuary. This is the quiet, massive, and deeply faithful part of you that resists all of the controlled strategy that you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of the unknown, of taking a leap, of your hard work being small, of missing out on the journey because some part of you simply refuses to just be a strategist. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, deep-seated need to run away from the pressure, a secret attachment to luck, and foreign wisdom that brings your constant practical drive to a momentary pause. And yet, this is also your secret infinite fuel. It is the unseen jovial heart that allows your mind to believe. This is where you dream, not through strategy, but through silent philosophical hope for what is possible before you are reborn in the first house to build and serve once more. With Aquarius on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to observe, deconstruct, and reinvent. This is not a hobby or a preference, it is your core mode of being. This isn't about being rebellious in the stereotypical sense. Rather, it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by making things smarter, more logical, and more humane. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planets of Saturn and Uranus define this perspective, filtering your entire world through the lens of scientific curiosity, future-oriented systems, and collective progress. You perceive the world as an intricate, fascinating, but fundamentally obsolete social mechanism that can be understood, categorized, and updated. The primary way you learn about yourself is by honing your intellect, applying it in detached ways, and seeing the functional results of your experiments. This creates a life path dedicated to a concept, a group, or a vision, where conformity, stagnation, or logical authority is not just an annoyance. It is a deep, fundamental threat that feels like a personal suffocating cage. Your identity is forged in the act of radical objectivity and breakage. To be ordinary, trapped, stagnant, or unthinking is a fundamental denial of your very being. This simple, essential truth about your need to disrupt things frames every other area of your life. That inherent restless and innovative drive is a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. A perfected system that is future-oriented, unfeeling, or purely metric-based is still, in its own way, fundamentally broken. Perfection of function, you learn, is useless if it creates isolation, harshness, or even spiritual emptiness. So with the second house in Pisces, your approach to resources is not just about function. It's about fluidity, faith, and the intangible. Ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, your values are processed through the lens of a boundless, compassionate, and imaginative release. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a toolbox of useful items. They are a vessel for universal connection. They must provide a deeply felt, essential sense of flow, mercy, and transcendence. This is where your Aquarian need to know is filtered by the Piscean need to believe. You are driven to value skills that heal, assets that are fluid, and a budget that creates space for dreams. You understand on a core level that a perfect system is only valuable if it allows for the unknown, not just the known. This need for spiritual and imaginative surrender is the only thing that gives your detached intellectual energy a purpose, creating a soft, limitless, and compassionate foundation from which your mind can safely and intuitively serve the world. That soft, limitless, and spiritual foundation you built is not a place to hide. It is the essential mystical silence that fuels your public engagement. The compassionate data your Piscean nature constantly gathers is just a vague mist, a collection of unspoken dreams. It is kind but not active. It is your third house in Aries that transforms this silent mist into a full-blown piercing interaction. Ruled by Mars, your mind is not just a sponge, it is a psychological weapon that is always turned on. Your core Aquarian need to observe and detach is transformed into a sharp, instinctive, and powerful will to strike at the truth. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are commands, sparks, and they observe the world head on. This is why a slow conversation, an audience that is passive, or a person who speaks in riddles is not just a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct, personal, and fundamental cage. It is a dull, suffocating fog that blunts the sharp edge of your second house and makes your Aquarian analysis feel trapped. Therefore, your communication is a constant piercing act of asserting your own mind, placing your agency at the deep, combative, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure the raw points are always immediately struck. That sharp, instinctive, and constant engagement with the world's raw friction is not just a skill, it is energetically burning and creates a massive chaotic heat of potential psychological combat, social friction, and adrenaline. With the fourth house in Taurus, your home and innermost self are not just a rest stop, they are a sacred, immovable, and sensory garden of your entire life. This is the payoff, and this is the why. For all of that radical, intellectual, and future-oriented mental travel of your Aquarius ascendant, this is the reward. Ruled by Venus, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one fundamental area of your life where you were not fighting, innovating, or rushing. You are rooting. This is where you retreat to find silence, simplicity, and a physical peace that transcends the mental noise. This foundational sense of deep, tactile calm is not a preference, it is a fundamental psychological requirement. Without a stubborn, beautiful, and consistent inner world, the constant sharp assertion of your third house degrades into a state of debilitating, frantic, and meaningless internal burnout, causing your Aquarian mind to collapse under the weight of endless disembodied noise. This simple earthen foundation is the only thing that makes your external analysis worthwhile. From that deep, tactile, and deeply peaceful inner garden where you've finally found your ground, your creative energy yearns for a mobile, externalized outlet. But this is not the heavy, slow expression of other signs. That Taurian peace was just a pause. It was a stillness, a solid rock with no voice. And so with the fifth house in Gemini, your joy is a deep, sacred, and almost frantic act of devotion to curiosity. Ruled by Mercury, this is where your slow sensory data is transformed into a rapid intellectual exchange with the real world. The Aquarian need to innovate merges with the Gemini need to speak or exchange information. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative project splitting into 10 interesting paths, the beauty of a clever loophole, the sheer thrill of a perfectly timed joke. Play for you is the absorbing process of mastering the art of variety so completely that you and your craft become one nimble, fascinating unit. It's the joy of the trickster finding the unexpected door, the writer juggling 3 plots, the musician improvising a complex riff. This is where your creative will becomes a will to learn and scatter, finding deep, mentally stimulating satisfaction in making your sensory piece distant, clever, and above all, multiple. The sacred, clever, and intellectual standard you set for your creative curiosity is not just a part-time hobby. It becomes the absolute essential template for interest that you must now apply to the repetitive, dry, and often cold reality of daily life. But the Gemini way was scattered, mental, and airy. And so with the 6th house in Cancer, your daily life, your work, and your health and your routines is where this ideal is absorbed. This house is ruled by the moon, and this is a crucial high-stakes link. Your daily life is a mood ring. Your routine is your tide. Your work environment is a direct reflection of your comfort. Therefore, a sterile job or a strictly business routine that is unfeeling or a harsh boss is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep psychological and bodily violation. It is an intolerable dry exile that shatters your core Aquarian need to connect systems, making you feel personally drained, unsafe, and deeply cold. Your drive here is a constant cyclic request to find an emotional rhythm. This is not about mundane chores. It is the transformative internal mission to find real nurturing sustenance in the mundane by creating a safer, softer, and more protective way of living. That soft, internal, and psychologically protective work you did was a quiet, retreating, and often private process. You have nurtured the daily rhythm, and you now yearn for a grand, blinding heat that rhythm cannot generate. With the 7th house in Leo, your one-on-one relationships are not just a simple meeting of minds. They are a boundless, bold, and theatrical quest for celebration. Ruled by the sun, this is the arena where your core Aquarian identity, which lives in a world of cold logic, innovation, and flattened hierarchies, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of the ego and what it means to connect with another. You are not drawn to partners who just want to blend in. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by a grand, commanding, and fiery special philosophy. This is where your identity as a rebel is dissolved, replaced by a quest for a shared crown. This mirror forces you to stop just observing the group and to finally adore the individual. Your endless logic for the first time must dissolve into a singular, radiant, and shared loyalty that can serve as a spotlight for a bigger life. One where you learn the ultimate Aquarian paradox, that some things can only be loved by being worshipped. That grand, radiant, and exhilarating quest for celebration was a promise. It was the grand, shared applause. But you were left floating in a blinding Leo spotlight, which, while warm, is also dramatic, egocentric, exaggerated, and subjective. And so now you are plunged from that blinding light of ego into the cool, sterile, and diagnostic room of consequences. With the 8th house in Virgo, you must prove that shared loyalty by fixing and purifying it. Ruled by Mercury, this is the arena where your innovative, theoretical, and ever-conceptual Aquarian nature, which loathes messy details and biological realities, is forced to confront the terrifying granular weight of imperfection. This is not a house of applause. It is a house of audits. Shared finances, deep psychological vows, intimacy, taxes, and inheritances are not grand gestures to be performed. They are intricate knots that demand dissection, hygiene, and immediate repair. Your core Uranian drive is to reinvent, to bypass, to see the macro, but Mercury's demand is to zoom in, to scrub, to correct, and to optimize. And this is where you are forced against every fiber of your being to become a humble technician of the depths, learning the quiet, precise, and profoundly necessary work of editing the soul. It is the hard, thankless, and necessary labor of making the love work by cleaning it, not just shining for it. After that quiet, precise, and analytical process of editing the soul in the depths, you have proven your competence. You have fixed the crisis, but you are exhausted, critical, and microscopic, left in the debris of the Virgo dissection. For you, an Aquarius rising, minute detail is not the point. It is the raw material for a better, more balanced society. So with the 9th house in Libra, you are dramatically liberated from that critical density and grounded in the breezy, elegant, and harmonious air of pure relational truth. Ruled by Venus, this is your ultimate philosophical compass. This is where your Aquarian intellect, having been forced through the Virgo microscope, gets to design an entirely new law. You are not interested in gritty utility or solitary perfection. You are driven to find a worldview that is socially fair, aesthetically pleasing, or diplomatically sound, or at the very least balanced. You build your philosophy not on dogma like a Sagittarius, but on consensus, on what is just or what creates peace, and on radical, polite ideals that consider all sides of the story. You build your worldview through dialectic comparison and artistic insights, creating a new balanced intellectual landscape that is open enough and beautiful enough to hold your experience and free you from the critical diagnostic world entirely. This is your reward, a philosophy you can share. That balanced, polite, and socially harmonious system you built was a perfect, elegant, and agreeable architecture. It was the ultimate freedom of pure fair thought. But a fair system is just a contract, a smooth, superficial agreement that sits fragile in a glass case. And so with the 10th house in Scorpio, your public role is to flood that smooth glass structure with the dark, volcanic, and regenerative magma of the collective shadow. Ruled by Pluto and Mars, this is the ultimate payoff and paradox of your life's work. This is where your Aquarian identity, the master of the future, the innovator, and the master of perfected logical utopias is called to become the face of the taboo. Your legacy is not polite. It's not a Libra treaty. It is your remarkable ability to navigate the crisis, the trauma, and the psychological underbelly that the world ignores. You go deep. You are not just a diplomat. You are a catalyst, a healer, or a detective. You are the expert who exposes the corruption or the writer who validates the pain. Your career is not about being liked, but about being feared or respected, or at the very least, the one who's willing to go deep, proving that the deepest use of the intellect is not just to balance the scales, but to transform the entire game. That intense, psychological, and transformative legacy you built was a masterpiece of depth. You became the catalyst, the detective, the power, but it was also heavy. It was all pressure and no sky. A career of crisis has no laughter. A transformation has no horizon. And so with the 11th house in Sagittarius, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are powerfully launched into a single blazing arrow of expansion. Ruled by Jupiter, this is the direct reaction to the Scorpionic darkness. This is the arena where your core Aquarian identity, the eternal scientist, the neutral observer, the master of fixed systems, is forced to take a leap. This could be a difficult challenge, to stop analyzing the data and to trust the journey. Your network and the causes you pursue are not just a Scorpionic cabal. It is the Sagittarian campfire, a gathering of wanderers, teachers, and chosen optimists. This is where your innovative, systematic drive is set free. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for fixing society. They are a call to adventure, to inspire your people. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to think, but to be the boisterous, believing heart that preaches the gospel of the future and fights for the joy of the dream. And finally, your journey through a wide, adventurous, and believing tribe leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and heavy part of your entire being. You have lost your scientific self to the wildness of the Sagittarian quest, and so with the 12th house in Capricorn, your radical, future-oriented, and ever-rebelling Aquarian mind must confront its secret jailer, an unseen, rigid, and authoritarian desire for control. Ruled by Saturn, this is your subconscious mountain. This is the quiet, ancient, and deeply conservative part of you that resists all of the progress that you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of chaos or of not being the boss, of your innovations failing, or of missing out on respect because some part of you simply refuses to just be an equal. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, deep-seated need to strictly manage the outcome, or a secret attachment to hierarchy and old rules that brings your constant progressive service to a grinding halt. And yet, this is also your secret skeletal strength. It is the unseen, disciplined backbone that allows your mind to build. This is where you mature, not through rebellion, but through silent, solitary endurance of what must be done before you are reborn into the first house to innovate and serve once more. With Pisces on the ascendant, your life is fundamentally framed by an essential instinctual drive to feel, merge, and dissolve. This is not a hobby or a preference. It is your core mode of being. This isn't about being lost in the stereotypical sense, but rather it's a deep psychological and constant impulse to engage with life by absorbing it and seeking a higher purpose. This is your default mode of operating. Your ruling planets of Neptune and Jupiter define this perspective, filtering your entire world through a lens of fluid compassion, spiritual systems, and empathetic processes. You perceive the world as an intricate, beautiful, but fundamentally disconnected mechanism that can be understood, unified, and healed. The primary way you learn about yourself is by honing your intuition, applying it in compassionate ways, and seeing the tangible results of your empathy. This creates a life path dedicated to an ideal, a service, or a system where coldness, rigidity, or good enough is not just an annoyance, it is a deep fundamental threat that feels like a personal failure. Your identity is forged in the act of thoughtful application and spiritual surrender. To be useless, wrong, cruel, or disconnected is a fundamental denial of your very being. This simple, essential truth about your need to heal things frames every other area of your life. That soft, porous, and boundless drive is a superpower, but it immediately confronts a deep internal problem. A compassionate ideal that is passive, slow, or defenseless is still in its own way fundamentally broken. Perfection of feeling, you learn, is useless if it creates inertia, hesitation, or simple defeat. So with the second house in Aries, your approach to resources is not just about ideals. It's about action, instinct, and initiative. Ruled by Mars, your values are processed through a lens of sharp, pioneering, and combat-ready drive. Money, possessions, and skills are not just a collection of dreams. They are an arsenal of active weapons. They must provide a deeply felt, essential sense of autonomy, speed, and victory. This is where the Piscean need to dissolve is filtered by the Arian need to conquer. You are driven to value skills that create impact and assets that are independent. You understand on a core level that a perfect ideal is only valuable if it is fought for. This need for instinctual action is the only thing that gives your scattered, compassionate energy a purpose, creating a stable, courageous, and independent foundation from which your mind can safely and effectively serve the world. That sharp, courageous, and independent foundation you built, it's not a place to hide. It is the essential, secure arsenal that fuels your public engagement. The instinctive data your Aryan nature constantly gathers, it's just a reaction, a collection of fast sparks. It is fast, but it is not sustainable. It is your third house in Taurus that transforms this impulsive script into a full-blown sensory probe. Ruled by Venus, your mind is not just a weapon, it is a psychological garden. Your core Piscean need to know and heal is transformed into a patient, methodical, and powerful will to know the root value. Your thoughts, speech, and daily interactions are not just exchanges, they are cultivations. This is why a rushed conversation or a person who evades the point is not just a simple annoyance. It feels like a direct, personal, and fundamental threat. It is a hollow void that shatters the reactive impulse of your second house and makes your Piscean empathy feel useless. Therefore, your communication is a constant, patient act of creating your own truth, placing your perspective at the deep, tangible, and necessary center of every conversation to ensure the real problem is always unflinchingly found. That patient, stable, and constant engagement with the world's hidden values is not just a skill, it is energetically exhausting and creates a massive chaotic storm of psychological clutter, potentially sensory overload, and stubborn feedback. So with the fourth house in Gemini, your home and innermost self are not just a sanctuary, they are a sacred, intellectual, and communicative library of your entire life. This is the payoff and this is the why. For all of the microscopic feeling and absorbing that your Pisces ascendant does in the world, this is the reward. Ruled by Mercury, this is one of the most crucial high-stakes links in your chart. This is the one fundamental place on Earth where you are not feeling, merging, or preserving. You are just thinking and studying. This is where you retreat to find data, ideas, and a higher logic that transcends the messy feelings. This foundational sense of expansive intellectual freedom, it's not a preference. It is a fundamental psychological requirement. Without a broad, curious, and logical inner world, the constant sensory analysis of your third house degrades into a state of debilitating, unbearable, and meaningless internal chaos, causing your Piscean mind to collapse under the weight of the pointless, unprocessed sensation. This database logical foundation is the only thing that makes your external empathy worthwhile. From that expansive, intellectual, and deeply communicative inner library where you've finally found your why, your creative energy yearns for a tangible externalized outlet. But this is not the raw, expressive joy of other signs. That Gemini logic was just an idea. It was a hot air grand theory with no heart. And so with the fifth house in Cancer, your joy is a deep, sacred, and almost sincere act of devotion to feeling. Ruled by the moon, this is where your abstract intellectual data is transformed into a refined emotional exchange with the real world. The Piscean need to merges with the Cancerian need to protect and to feel from the heart. This is your deepest pleasure, the feeling of a creative project perfectly clicking into an emotional structure, the beauty of a well-nurtured skill, the sheer comfort of a perfectly executed act of care, or the pure joy in chasing whatever it is that brings you joy. Play for you is the absorbing process of mastering the art of feeling so completely that you and your craft become one protective, nurturing unit. It is the joy of the caregiver finding the perfect home, the writer finishing the entire soulful manuscript, the musician mastering the most emotional piece. And this is where your creative will becomes a will to achieve, protect, finding deep and profound satisfaction in making your intellectual fragments real, useful, and above all, safe. The protective and emotional standard you set for your creative mastery is not a hobby. It becomes the essential template for truth that you apply to the messy reality. But the Cancerian way was quiet and very deeply felt internally. But with the 6th house in Leo, your daily life is where this ideal is illuminated more outward, because this house is ruled by the sun. This is a crucial link. Your daily life is a stage, and your routine is your performance. Your work environment is a reflection of your spirit. Therefore, a dull job or a just good enough routine that is unseen is not just a mere annoyance. It is a deep psychological violation. It is a lie that shatters your core Piscean need to heal, making you feel invisible. You must shine in your routines, and whether you are brushing your teeth, working on a project, or even just shopping for groceries, everything you do must be an authentic reflection of you, and it must be an outlet where you can radiate your true self. Your drive here is a quest to find the new root joy. This is not just about chores, it's the mission to find real, vital power in the mundane by creating a better, more radiant, and more creative way of living. It's about turning something that's boring and making it a stage to really shine bright. That intense, radiant, and psychologically expressive work you did was a radiant, dramatic, but often chaotic process. You have perfected the performance, and now you yearn for a grand unifying process that the stage cannot explain. And so with the 7th house in Virgo, your one-on-one relationships are not a simple meeting of minds. They are a boundless, precise, and analytical quest for service through another. Ruled by Mercury, this is the arena where your core Piscean identity, which lives in a world of feelings, boundlessness, and perfect empathy, comes face to face with the singular, unshakable power of facts through another. You are not drawn to partners who just want to feel things. You are drawn, often against your own nature, to people who live by an analytical, functional, and detail-oriented philosophy. This is where your identity as a dreamer is dissolved, replaced by a quest for a shared process. This mirror forces you to stop just feeling and to finally analyze what you believe in through the mirror of another. Your endless feelings for the first time must dissolve into a singular, practical, and shared process that can serve as a map for a bigger life. One where you learn the ultimate Piscean paradox, that some things can only be perfected by being made functional. That precise, critical, and functional quest for service was a promise. It was the grand, shared fix through another. But you are left floating in a boundless Virgo ocean of details, which, while functional, could also feel a little bit dry. It feels a little bit too detail-oriented and impersonal and stuck in the facts. And so now you are plunged from that boundless ocean of analysis into the Aries social and decisive forge of consequences. With the 8th house in Libra, you must prove that shared function by balancing and harmonizing it. Ruled by Venus, this is the arena where your empathetic, chaotic, and ever-dissolving Piscean nature, which loathes conflict and injustice, is forced to confront the terrifying, immovable weight of diplomacy. This is not a house of crises. It's a house of negotiations. Shared finances, deep psychological vows, intimacy, taxes, and inheritances are not abstract concepts to be analyzed from a safe distance. They are battlefields that demand fairness, poise, and immediate social action. Your core Neptunian drive is to merge, to feel, and to embrace things as they are. Venus's demand is to negotiate now, to balance, to have a preference, and to observe those preferences not through the Neptunian merging and acceptance. This is where you are forced against every fiber of your being to become a social architect of the depths, learning that fast, polite, and deeply serious work of transforming through compromise. It is the hard yet balanced and necessary labor of making the dream real by balancing it, not just feeling it. After the diplomatic, polite, and social process of balancing for survival in the depths, you have proven your fairness. You have survived the balancing act, but you are exhausted. Your surface level and ungrounded energy needs to be diffused and left in the polite fiction of the Libra agreement. And so for you, a Pisces, social grace and deciding what is fair is not the point. It is the launch pad for a better, more potent system. With the ninth house in Scorpio, you are dramatically liberated from that airy density and grounded in the deep, fixed, and intense ocean of pure visceral truth. Ruled by Pluto and Mars, this is your ultimate philosophical anchor. This is where your Piscean ability, having been forced through the Libra social negotiation, gets to design an entirely new system, one that is deep and true. You are not interested in social dogma or abstract beliefs. You are driven to find a worldview that is deep, intense, and emotionally real. You build your philosophy not on faith, but on guts, on what works psychologically, on what you can feel in your blood, and on radical, simple ideals. You build your worldview through slow, patient, and investigative insights on a grounded, objective perspective, creating a new radical psychological ground that is vast enough and stable enough to hold your experience and free you from the chaotic feeling world entirely. This is your reward. It's a philosophy you can live in. That radical, psychological, and visceral system you built was a perfect, intense, and penetrating piece of architecture. It was the ultimate freedom of pure, investigative thought. But a perfect system is just a shell, an intense, psychologically powerful wall built by unbreakable steel. But with the 10th house in Sagittarius, your public role is to flood that rigid, silent, and powerful structure with the boundless, expansive, and optimistic ocean of the collective mind. Ruled by Jupiter, which is your chart ruler traditionally as well, this is your ultimate payoff and paradox of your life's work. This is where your Piscean identity, the master of feelings, empathy, and perfected unstructured systems, is called to become the public voice for a higher meaning. Your legacy is not rigid. It's not a scorpionic monument. It is your remarkable ability to translate the complex, the deep, and the specialized into a form the world can believe in and into a form that sees the big picture. You are not just an empath. You are a philosopher, a teacher, a guide. You are the expert who explains the vision, the writer who makes the complex system accessible for everybody. Your career is not about climbing one ladder, but about building an entire university. Proving that the deepest use of the intellect is not just to find the perfect answer, but to share it with everybody in a way that resonates and expands their minds and their souls. That adaptive, expansive, and philosophical legacy you built was a masterpiece of vision. You became the translator, the hub, the expansive philosopher, but it was also abstract. It was all head and not a lot of structure. A network of believers has no foundation, and a connection that's expansive doesn't always have form. So with the 11th house in Capricorn, your hopes for the future and your connection to community are powerfully galvanized into a single feeling point of structure. Ruled by Saturn, this is a direct reaction to the Sagittarian expansion. This is the arena where your core Piscean identity, the eternal dreamer, the empath, and the master of unseen systems is forced to pick a structure. This is your most difficult challenge, to stop simply trying to expand and work on the big picture with no form, but to build a foundation that has form and can hold your contributions. Your network is not a Sagittarian congregation. It is a Capricornian fortress. It's an army of builders, authorities, and chosen achievers. This is where your empathetic, philosophical drive is structured. You learn, perhaps shockingly, that your ideas are not just for debate. They are a call to arms to build your people, to have people who withstand the test of time. Your ultimate place in the collective is not just to expand and to teach, but to be the courageous structural heart that starts the revolution and fights for the reality of the dream and builds the structure to support that. And finally, your journey through the disciplined, structural, and authoritative tribe leads you to the most hidden, paradoxical, and proud part of your entire being. You have lost your empathetic self to the safety of the Capricornian structure. So with the 12th house in Aquarius, your practical, boundless, and ever-serving Pisces mind must confront its secret kryptonite. It's an unseen, immovable, and intellectual ideal that is progressive and is for the future. And so ruled by Saturn and Uranus, this is your subconscious undoing. This is the quiet, persistent, and deeply innovative part of you that resists all emotional merging you consciously crave. This is the source of your deepest anxieties, the fear of being ordinary, of not being unique, or of your hard work being unrecognized, or missing out on the revolution because some part of you simply refuses to just be a helper. This is the self-sabotaging urge that manifests as a private, deep-seated refusal to just be a cog in the emotional machine, a secret attachment to intellectual ideals, and a personal freedom that brings your constant empathetic service to a grinding halt. And yet, this is also your secret primal life force. It is the unseen, innovative mind that allows your heart to serve. This is where you recharge, not through feeling, but through silent intellectual connection to what makes you feel special, what pushes the boundaries, before you are reborn in the first house to merge and serve once more.